Asagi was an exhausted convenience store worker until a knife ended his old life and dropped him into a lethal fantasy wilderness. The world expected another helpless outsider, but every weapon he touched instantly became something he could wield like a trained veteran. His first minutes were spent bleeding, panicking, and searching for anything sharp enough to keep monsters away. With nobody coming to rescue him, survival depended on a cheap cutter, a wooden branch, and the skill called jack of all trades. The rule was brutally simple: once Asagi handled a tool or weapon, combat knowledge flooded directly into his mind. That advantage transformed a crude wooden spear into a real killing weapon. Before his first goblin could reach him, Asagi struck, survived, and proved that his supposedly mediocre skill could turn discarded equipment into immediate battlefield mastery. Later, that same underestimated survivor would stand beside Dianiela, a powerful high elf whose strength completely changed his journey. The frightened worker who once hid behind a store counter was already becoming faster, sharper, and far more dangerous than anyone expected. By his first confirmed monster kill, the fantasy world's so-called weak beginner had demonstrated an advantage no ordinary adventurer possessed. The story starts with our protagonist, Asagi Kamiyashiro, who was just an ordinary guy working the graveyard shift at a convenience store. While cleaning the parking lot at 300 a.m., he noticed a creepy figure standing by a utility pole. Shaken, he retreated inside to check the security cameras, only for the man to enter the store and pull a knife. Next thing, as Asagi lay dying on the floor in pain, a mysterious voice echoed in his head, granting him a unique skill called Jack of all Trades. Before he lost consciousness, he woke up on a foggy green hill, completely healed. Realizing he had been transported to a fantasy world, Asagi decided to move toward a nearby forest to find food and a weapon. Using a simple cutter he had in his pocket, he crafted a crude wooden spear. To his surprise, his new skill allowed him to move like a pro. Images of how to strike flashed in his mind, making him an instant expert with the spear. He soon encountered a goblin and, despite his fear, managed to kill it by following the combat patterns in his head. After the fight, he realized that picking up the goblin's rusty hatchet gave him instant mastery over that weapon too. Survival wasn't easy. Asagi had to hide from a large pack of goblins, eventually using a distraction to pick one off and escape. He spent the next few days trekking across a vast plain, following wagon tracks he hoped would lead to a town. He spent his nights tied to tree branches for safety, then his days hunting for food. He managed to kill a wolf for meat and learned how to start a fire by trial and error, aided by his skill. On the sixth day, the path led him into a dense forest. He felt eyes watching him from the shadows. A pack of green-furred forest wolves was hunting him. He sprinted for his life, throwing his spear behind him to trip up the leaders. Just as the wolves were about to close in, he burst through the tree line and saw the gates of a town. Asagi screamed for help. In the town, guards, a group of middle-aged men with spears, rushed out to fend off the wolves. While the guards handled the monsters with surprising ease, two rough-looking adventurers named Gald and Nis approached Asagi. They mocked him for being terrified of weak wolves and held him at knife point to make sure he wasn't a threat. After seeing his pathetic notched hatchet and hearing how he survived the forest alone, they nicknamed him Black Rabbit because of his black hair and his tendency to run away. Once the situation calmed down, the head guard Russell took pity on the dirty, exhausted traveler. He let Asagi wash up at a well and gave him some clean clothes. Finally safe and standing within the walls of the town of Fillard, Asagi realized his new life in the strange world had truly begun. Russell, the guard captain, turned out to be a pretty big deal. He proudly showed off his star-shaped badge and pointed Asagi toward a high quality and called the Spring Breeze establishment. Since Asagi was broke, Russell even lent him a bag of silver and copper coins, telling him to pay it back whenever he could. He also encouraged Asagi to register as an adventurer to start earning his own way. Asagi headed to the inn and met the owner, a tough but friendly woman named Mari. When she heard Russell sent him, she gave him a great deal. A week's stay in a nice room with 3 meals a day included. After dropping off his things, Asagi explored the town. Fillard was a lively place, filled with shops and wooden buildings, but he stayed focused on his goal, the Adventurers Guild. Inside the guild, things got annoying fast. Because of his black hair and the stories Gald and Nis had spread about him running away from wolves, the local drunks started mocking him, calling him Black Rabbit. One guy even tried to pick a fight, but Gald stepped in and shut it down. Gald apologized for his partner Nis being a big mouth, but the damage to Asaga's reputation was already done. Hold up, smash like, and subscribe for more hidden manga gems. Now, I dare you to comment. I'm loving it. I bet most of you won't do it. Alright, let's continue. Asagi went to the registration counter and met a quiet staff member named Fiona. He filled out his forms, noting his combat experience with goblins and wolves. When he checked his status card, he was shocked to see his agility, AGI, was incredibly high, while his other stats were pretty average. The real kicker was his unique skill, Jack of all trades. When the other adventurers saw the name, they burst out laughing, calling it a useless skill that makes him a master of nothing. Feeling humiliated and fed up, Asagi pricked his finger, bled on the card to finalize his registration, and left. Over the next 2 weeks, Asagi settled into a routine. He ignored the insults and took herb collection quests every day. While most adventurers found this work boring, and beneath them, Asagi used it as a cover. He would collect the herbs quickly, then head deeper into the forest to hunt goblins. His jack-of-all-trades skill made him a natural with weapons, and his high speed allowed him to take down groups of goblins before they could even react. He used the money from the herbs and the scrap metal from the goblins' rusty weapons to upgrade his gear. He befriended a half-dwarf blacksmith named Alara, who sold him decent swords and daggers made by apprentices. Asagi practiced a two-sword fighting style, relying on his speed to stay safe. His hard work paid off. After 2 weeks of secret grinding, Asagi reached level 20. Because his level had jumped so fast, the guild forced him to rank up twice, skipping past the beginner rank straight to E rank, known as Crystal. Fiona, the receptionist, warned him not to get cocky and die, but she also started acting a bit more friendly toward him. As he left the guild, the jealous low-rank adventurers tried to corner him again, angry that he was ranking up and getting attention from Fiona. But with his insane speed, Asagi just sprinted past them, leaving them eating his dust as he headed back to the inn to plan his next move. Asagi met Ajira at the forge to upgrade his gear. Since Asagi had reached level 20 and climbed to E-rank Crystal in record time, the blacksmith was impressed enough to offer to craft a custom weapon personally. Allegra gave him a high-quality loaner sword from his apprentice. In the meantime, telling Asagi to gain more experience while his custom blade was being forged. Walking through town at sunset, Asagi was distracted by the smell of food and accidentally bumped into a tall person wearing a mask. The stranger was soft-spoken and admitted they were also distracted by the food stall. Noticing the stranger was hungry, Asagi bought 2 portions of a noodle dish, and they went to a nearby park to eat. When the stranger removed the mask to eat, Asagi was stunned to see a beautiful woman. She introduced herself as Dianiela. They shared a quiet, pleasant meal, and Asagi found her reaction to the food quite charming. After finishing, they prepared to go their separate ways, but as Asagi walked off, he heard her shout in distress. He rushed back to find Dianiela surrounded by the same group of low-rank adventurers who had been harassing him at the guild. The thugs tried to extort Asagi, threatening to hurt Dianiela if he didn't hand over his money. Refusing to back down, Asagi drew his weapons, keeping them in their sheath to avoid unnecessary killing, and used his superior speed to tackle one of the thugs and reach Dianiela's side. He told her to run to the southern gate and find Captain Russell for help. Dianiela was impressed by his bravery and shared her name before disappearing into the night. Left alone with the angry mob, Asagi used his swords to kick up a massive cloud of dust and sand, blinding the thugs and allowing him to make a clean escape. Asagi reached the guard station and found that Dianiela had made it safely. Captain Russell was furious that the local adventurers were causing trouble and personally led a squad to round them all up. Since it was late, Asagi and Dianiela were given a room at the station to sleep in. There was only one bed, so Asagi insisted Dianiela take it while he slept. At the desk, a habit he picked up from his days working convenience store shift. Before they slept, Dianiela revealed she was a wind magic user and had escaped the thugs by jumping across rooftops. She offered to test Asagi's magic potential, following her instructions to visualize energy flowing through his body. Asagi felt a surge of coldness. Dianiela told him he had a rare affinity for ice and water magic with a tiny bit of fire. Excited, Asagi tried his first spell, successfully lowering the room's temperature until Dianiela complained about the cold. The next morning, Russell informed them that the thugs had been captured. Asagi and Dianiela went to the dungeon to identify them. Russell explained that since they drew weapons with intent to kill, he could technically execute them, but he left the choice to Asagi, not wanting blood on his hands. Asagi chose to have them stripped of their adventure status and sent to the mines as criminal slaves for 10 years. After the ordeal, Dianiela suggested they officially form a party. She admitted she was worried about him because he was leveling up way too fast for a beginner. Asagi agreed, feeling lucky to have found a reliable partner. They headed to the guild where Galdanis, the 2 adventurers who had started the Black Rabbit rumors, sincerely apologized for their behavior. They promised to protect his reputation from now on. Asagi and Dianiela officially registered their party with the receptionist, Fiona. When they checked each other's stats, Asagi was shocked to see that Dianiela was a level 6 to 7 high elf with incredible stats. Despite her high level, she promised to let Asagi take the lead so he could keep learning. They took a quest to hunt forest wolves, the same monsters that had nearly killed Asagi when he first arrived. Deep in the forest, Dianiela used her green eyes skill to spot a pack of 6 wolves. She took out the first one with a silent bow shot, and Asagi charged, and using his insane speed to decapitate the others. With Dianiela's help, the hunt was a total success, and Asagi finally felt like he had conquered his past fears. Hours after the battle with the forest wolves, Asagi and Dianiela decided to head back to Fillard as the sun began to set. On the way, Dianiela gave Asagi a crash course on combat, how to swing and throw daggers, how to handle being surrounded, and most importantly, how to use magic. Asagi learned that while most mages use a lot of mana to create water or ice, he could save energy by manipulating the moisture already in the air. Dianiela explained that the basics of ice magic involved creating a shard, aiming it, and firing it at the enemy. Asagi focused, gathering moisture at his fingertips and freezing it into a small, clear bullet. Visualizing a video game crosshair, he fired. The ice bullet moved so fast Dianiela couldn't even see it, leaving a small crater in a nearby tree. She was stunned by the speed and power coming from such a tiny projectile. After the lesson, they collected the proof of their hunt, the teeth from each wolf. These teeth are valuable crafting materials, and the guild pays out based on the quantity and quality. Asagi was happy to see his hard work literally turning into weight in his bag. As they walked, Asagi thought he saw a massive wolf in the shadows, but since he couldn't feel a presence, he brushed it off as his imagination playing tricks on him after a long day of hunting. They reached the town gates just before closing. Russell, the guard captain, joked about locking them out for the night before letting them through. Inside, the town was buzzing with the smell of street food, but Asagi dragged a hungry Dianiela straight to the guild to turn in their quest. At the counter, Fiona, the receptionist, seemed annoyed to see Asagi with the beautiful woman. After a brief, awkward introduction, where Fiona acted surprisingly friendly and a bit jealous, she took the wolf teeth for processing. Meanwhile, they spotted Asagi and dragged him over for a drink. Asagi sat with the rowdy adventurers, realizing that despite the rough start, he was starting to fit in. Later, Fiona handed over the payout, 1 gold and 90 silver coins. After splitting it fairly with Dianiela, Asagi headed back to the inn. The next morning, he met Miser, the daughter of the innkeeper Mari. Miser was a bit spacey, but friendly, complaining about her long shifts and her mother's strictness. Once Dianiela finally woke up and joined them for breakfast, she dropped a bombshell. They were going on a training camp. She wanted to spend 3 days straight in the forest to sharpen Asagi's survival and combat senses. Asagi liked the idea, though he was worried about sleeping in the wild. Dianiela assured him she had a magical barrier device to keep them safe at night. After buying supplies and a tent, they headed into the woods. They set up a base camp with the tarp and the barrier device. On the first day, Dianiela taught Asagi how to sense presences. While he couldn't detect mana perfectly yet, he started to feel the difference between a monster and a normal animal. The next morning, Asagi woke up early. He had accidentally walked in on a sleeping naked Dianiela earlier, which led to a very awkward exit. So, he decided to give her space and go hunting alone. Using his jack-of-all-trades skill, he crafted a functional bow and arrows from branches and vines. He tracked a herd of deer, used his new sensing skills to stay downwind, and landed a perfect shot on a doe. When he returned to camp with the deer, Dianiela was relieved. She apologized for being cold to him after the naked incident, explaining she had just been embarrassed. They made up, cooked the deer meat, and spent the next 2 days hunting intensely. Asagi's level jumped to 32, and he officially unlocked the presence sensing skill. However, on their last night, the forest went silent. The usual wolves were gone. Suddenly, Dianiela tackled Asagi out of the way just as a massive shadow trashed their campsite. It was a Beowulf, a giant 2m tall evolved wolf with 3 tails. Realizing they couldn't outrun it in the dark, they fled toward a nearby stone ruin. Dianiela identified it as an ancient elf ruin from a lost era of high magic. They ducked inside a large room to bottleneck the monster. Asagi acted as bait, drawing the Beowulf in. On his signal, Dianiela used earth magic to collapse the floor under the beast, and Asagi flooded the hole with a massive burst of water magic, turning it into a muddy trap. As the Beowulf struggled, Dianiela fired a powerful wind-enchanted arrow straight into the monster's right eye. The beast let out a deafening roar of pain, and the real fight for their lives began. Asagi woke up in a daze, his body having smashed through a stone wall. His vision was blurry, his ears were ringing, and the pain was so intense he couldn't breathe. Through the fog, he heard Dianiela screaming his name. As he regained consciousness, a voice boomed from above. It was the Beowulf. The massive wolf was pinning Asagi down with its heavy paw, mocking him for being a strong human. Dianiela tried to aim her bow, but the beast warned her that if she fired, Asagi would die instantly. The Beowulf explained it wasn't there for revenge. It didn't care that Asagi had killed its pack. It simply believed the weak deserved to die. It had come out of curiosity, because it wanted to see the person strong enough to injure it. Asagi, realizing they were outmatched, looked the wolf in the eye and made a deal. "Kill me, but let Dianiela go." Dianiela cried out in protest, but Asagi was ready. He felt that if his life, a life he had already lost once back at the convenience store, could save his partner, it was a fair trade. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end, reflecting on how much more meaningful his life had become since meeting Dianiela, but the killing blow never came. The Beowulf suddenly lifted its paw and laughed. It decided that since Asagi was the first being to ever wound it so badly, even more than a wyvern, it was too wasteful to kill him. The wolf announced it was leaving the forest to travel and find even stronger opponents. Dianiela rushed to Asagi's side, sobbing with relief. As the tension broke, the Beowulf mentioned it had ordered the remaining forest wolves to move to the southern forest, the goblin territory, which explained the shift in the woods. As they recovered, Asagi noticed a faint light coming from a crack in the wall the Beowulf had kicked. The wolf helped by smashing the rest of the wall, revealing a hidden chamber filled with ancient elf weapons. A double-edged straight sword, a dagger, a spear, and a beautiful green bow. Dianiela explained these were masterpieces from the High Magic era, over 1,000 years old, preserved perfectly by ancient spell. They were priceless artifacts that would normally be locked away by noble. Asagi tried to give them to Dianiela, but she refused to replace her mother's keepsakes. They decided to split them for now. Asagi took the sword, spear, and bow, while Dianiela took the dagger. Before the Beowulf left, it stopped Asagi one last time. "I'm giving you a gift," it said. The wolf let out a long haunting howl that turned into particles of light sensing into Asagi's body. He instantly felt a new power take root, a unique skill called Forest Wolf's Leg. With a final smirk, the beast vanished into the night. Back at camp, Dianiela shared a dark secret from her past. 70 years ago, her village was wiped out by a stampede of adult dragons. She had watched her parents get crushed before her eyes and survived only by hiding in a cellar for a month. This was why she had panicked so badly when the Beowulf pinned Asagi down. It triggered her trauma. Asagi comforted her, realizing why she was so attached to her old gear. The next day, they returned to Fillard. Asagi registered the ancient elf weapons at the guild for safekeeping and received a massive payout for gold coins for the wolf hunt. Fiona, the receptionist, began acting very clingy, hinting that Asagi was a diamond in the rough and a catch for any girl, which made Asagi feel awkward. Exhausted, Asagi went back to the inn and slept for nearly 20 hours. When he finally woke up, he headed to the communal bath. There, he overheard other adventurers complaining about a sudden influx of forest wolves in the south, confirming the Beowulf's migration plan had worked. Next, Asagi visited Allegra the blacksmith. The master smith handed over a custom-made steel sword and a matching dagger, both marked with his personal emblem. Allegra warned him, "Don't rely on the weapon, but let the weapon protect you." Finally, alone, Asagi checked his status. His level had reached 33, and he looked into his new skill, Forest Wolf's Leg. His mind flashed with images of moving so fast he could practically fly, and even change direction in midair. It was a broken cheat skill, but he realized he couldn't show it off in public without drawing dangerous attention. To learn more about the Beowulf's gift, Asagi visited an old book collector named McBell, a former royal librarian. After searching through massive stacks of books, McBell dropped a bombshell. The Beowulf wasn't just a monster. It was a calamity-class evolution caused by high concentrations of mana. These creatures were known for wiping out entire cities. McBell warned Asagi to keep the Forest Wolf's Leg skill a total secret. If the kingdom found out a human was carrying the power of a disaster-level monster, they would either capture him for research or execute him as a threat. Asagi realized that while he had gained incredible power, he now had a target on his back. After deciding to keep the power of the Beowulf's gift a secret, Asagi struggled with lack of sleep, worrying about his future. The next morning, a thick blanket of clouds covered the sky, signaling rain and a break from hunting. Downstairs at the inn, He reflected on his new life. He realized he had no desire to return to his old world of convenience store night shifts. He was actually starting to enjoy this fantasy world. When Dianiela joined him for breakfast, they discussed their next move. Dianiela explained that she had been traveling to see the world since her village was destroyed by dragons decades ago. Since Asagi had been the one keeping her in Fillard, he offered to travel. They made a pact to head out together as a party once the situation with the Beowulf in the forest settled. Asagi also warned her about what he learned from McBell, that the Beowulf was a calamity-class monster capable of destroying city. They decided their final task in Fillard would be to convince the Beowulf not to attack human settlements before it left the region, with the rain keeping them indoors for 2 days. Asagi focused on magic training. He practiced mana manipulation, learning to create a dense water sphere by carefully layering his energy rather than just rushing the process. When he showed his progress to Dianiela, she nearly panicked, warning him that practicing high-density magic inside a wooden ink could blow the building apart if he lost control. After a tense moment of stabilizing the spell, Asagi realized he still had a lot to learn about the common sense of this world. Once the rain stopped, the duo headed into the muddy forest to find the Beowulf. They were met by 3 forest wolves that didn't attack. Instead, they acted as guides, leading the pair to a clearing where the giant silver wolf waited with its pack. Asagi approached the beast and made a request: stay away from human towns to avoid being hunted by an army. The Beowulf, surprisingly reasonable, laughed and agreed. It respected Asagi as a warrior and saw no point in fighting weak humans anymore. In a show of mutual respect, Asagi and the calamity-class monster bumped fist to paw before the wolf and its pack vanished into the woods to begin their own journey. Back in Fillard, it was time for goodbyes. Mari, the innkeeper, gave them a warm send-off, telling Asagi to protect Dianiela. At the guard station, Captain Russell gave Asagi a parting gift, a hollow bag. It was a rare magic item with a pocket dimension inside, allowing Asagi to carry massive amounts of gear, including his ancient elf weapons and piles of monster loot without any weight. At the guild, the receptionist Fiona caused a scene, jokingly crying about her dream of marrying a rich guy leaving with him, while Gald and Nis wished him luck. Asagi's final stop was Aligira's fort. To thank the blacksmith, Asagi showed him the ancient elf sword. Allegro was stunned by the legendary craftsmanship, calling it a masterpiece that belonged in a museum. After a final firm handshake and a motivational slap on the back from the smith, Asagi met Dianiela at the eastern gate. Leaving Fillard was emotional, but as they walked through the gates, Asagi felt ready. He wasn't the terrified guy with a wooden spear anymore. He was an E-rank adventurer with a powerful partner by his side. Their journey east toward the town of Spirus took several days. The trip was peaceful at first, but on the 3rd day, a massive storm hit. They pushed through the mud and rain until they reached a wide grassland, the territory of grass wolves. Using his presence sensing, Asagi tracked the monsters while Dianiela took the lead. That night, they camped under a tarp. Asagi used his hollow bag to pull out dry wood and cooked a hot vegetable and dried meat soup. Dianiela, who had a surprisingly huge appetite despite her slim build, happily ate her fill before heading to sleep. During his night watch, Asagi used a small specialized tool made for him to trim his hair, which had grown long since he arrived in this world. He also discovered that the hollow bag acted like a freezer. Time stood still inside it, meaning food stayed fresh and hot things stayed hot. He celebrated this discovery by cooking a secret midnight snack of spiced meat, only to be caught by a hungry Dianiela, who demanded her share. The next morning, Asagi was so exhausted from his night shift that he fell asleep the moment Dianiela woke up. Dianiela ended up carrying him on her back for a few hours to keep them on schedule. When he woke up, they were ambushed by a pack of grass wolves. The duo moved in perfect sync. Dianiela pierced the first one. Asagi sliced the second. They teamed up for the third, and Asagi finished the last one with a high-speed ice bullet from his fingertip. By the 5th day, they reached the edge of a new forest. To celebrate their last night on the road, Asagi hunted a deer and prepared a massive feast. He roasted the meat over the fire until it was perfectly charred on the outside and juicy on the inside. As they sat by the fire, eating and talking under the 3 moons, Asagi felt truly happy. The jack of all trades was finally finding his place in the world. However, the peace didn't last. In the middle of the night, as the moons crossed the peak of the sky, something shifted in the darkness. A new threat was approaching. Asagi was jolted awake by Dianiela as a new threat emerged from the dark. 3 orcs were approaching, survivors from a recent hunt in the southern mountain. Dianiela warned him that orcs possess monstrous strength capable of swinging tree trunks like clubs. Since the duo relied on speed over raw power, they decided on a stealthy ambush. Asagi used his water magic to soak a pile of fallen leaves, covering himself to create a makeshift ghillie suit. He laid a trap by placing dried meat and fruit between the trees to lure them in. When the three massive green-kin beasts approached the bait, Asagi struck first. He funneled mana into the ground, erupting sharp ice pillars beneath their feet. As the orc screamed in pain, Dianiela fired an arrow from the trees, instantly killing one. Asagi lunged at the second, slashing its throat with his steel sword and finishing it off with a magically conjured ice blade. The final orc managed to break the ice, trapping its feet, and swung its massive club, narrowly missing Asagi's head. Using his superior agility, Asagi danced around the beast, slicing its side with his ice blade and severing its ankle with his steel sword. As the orc collapsed, thrashing wildly, Asagi fired his ice blade like a projectile, pinning the monster to a tree through its forehead. With the threat neutralized, they collected the orc's thick tusks as proof of the hunt and returned to camp. The next morning, as they neared the end of the forest, Asagi sensed someone approaching rapidly on horseback. To his dismay, it was Fiona, the guild receptionist from Fillard. She had been transferred to the city of Spirus and had used a fast half-unicorn to catch up with them. As they walked together toward the exit of the woods, the trees finally gave way to a vast, beautiful grassland. In the distance, they saw the massive fortified walls of the plain city Spirus. The peaceful walk was cut short when a massive shadow covered the ground. A wyvern was circling above, targeting them. The sight triggered Dianiela's past trauma of the dragon attack on her village, leaving her frozen in fear. With the wyvern diving for the kill, Asagi knew he had to use his secret power. He activated his forest wolf's leg skill, scooped Dianiela into his arms, and sprinted at incredible speeds, easily keeping pace with Fiona's galloping horse. As they sprinted toward the city gates, Asagi realized they couldn't lead a wyvern into a populated area without warning. Dianiela managed to snap out of her panic long enough to fire a flash arrow into the sky, signaling the city guards. Seeing the signal, the guards prepared the wall-mounted ballistas. As they reached the final hill, Asagi jumped onto the horse with Fiona and Dianiela. He conjured one last ice blade and fired it with pinpoint accuracy, piercing the wyvern's left eye. The beast crashed into the grass, and the city guards finished it off with a barrage of giant bolts. Inside the city, a guard captain named Harold hailed Asagi as a hero for grounding the wyvern. Though Asagi tried to downplay his role to avoid unwanted attention, Harold personally escorted them to a high quality and called the Silver Sky. After checking in, Asagi realized his old convenience store uniform was finally falling apart from all the fighting. He and Dianiela decided to head out into the city to buy new gear and visit the local adventurers guild. While checking his status, Asagi saw he had reached level 36, and his speed was now nearly off the charts. As they walked through the lively pastel-cold streets of Spirus, Asagi felt a sense of peace until he accidentally walked straight into a massive man. The stranger loomed over him, growling about the collision, signaling that Asagi's streak of bad luck with thugs wasn't over yet. Asagi was navigating the streets of Spirus, staring at a guidebook when he accidentally bumped into a massive rough-looking man. Expecting a fight, Asagi quickly apologized, explaining he was new to town. To his surprise, the man, a local adventurer named Penshoro, burst out laughing and even walked Asagi to a nearby clothing store. Penzoro was friendly and warned them to drop the formal talk since they were all fellow rough adventurers. After Penzoro left, Asagi noticed Dianiela had been unusually silent, almost invisible. He asked why she went quiet around new people, and a flustered Dianiela admitted she was terrible at small talk. She had traveled alone for so long that she struggled with social distances. Asagi laughed it off, glad she could at least talk to him, and they entered a shop called Goblin's Boutique. The store sold edgy, punk, and gothic styles. While Asagi found nothing for himself, he caught Dianiela eyeing a frilly gothic Lolita dress. Despite her protests that she'd never wear something so cute, a pink-haired clerk with face chains noticed her interest. Asagi teased her and bought the dress on. As the battle kicked off, the adventurers moved like a well-oiled machine. They didn't take unnecessary risks, using their numbers to surround the wyvern and slowly chip away at its health. A warrior with a massive shield took the lead as the tank, drawing the beast aggression and expertly parrying its heavy strike whenever the wyvern overextended. The others rushed into land hits before backing off, perfectly managing the monster's focus. It looked exactly like a strategy from a modern online game. They didn't seem to have a healer, but they made up for it by chugging high-quality potions mid-fight. As the battle went on, they managed to shred the wyvern's wing membranes, grounding the beast. Next, they went for the tail, which was swinging around like a deadly mace. While the shield warrior blocked the tail swipes, the swordsman tried to hack through the tough scales at the base. Suddenly, the wyvern took a deep breath, recognizing the sign of a breath attack. The adventurers scrambled behind the shield warrior, who braced himself by driving stakes from his shield into the ground. A massive blast of compressed wind magic erupted, shredding the surrounding trees. The group huddled behind their tank, barely holding on against the pressure. When the dust cleared, the situation had turned tragic. The wyvern's breath hadn't been a wide blast, but a high-density beam that punched a hole straight through the heavy shield and the warrior's armor. The tank collapsed, pale and bleeding out. The leader ordered his team to retreat and pour potions on the wound, while one man carried the fallen comrade away. With their formation broken and their numbers thinned, the remaining adventurers struggled. One swordsman picked up a second blade, desperately trying to distract the beast, but without a tank, he was wide open. The wyvern, sensing victory, ignored the fighters and charged toward the wounded man being carried away. Watching from the shadows, a choice had to be made. Keep the secret forest wolf's legs still hidden or save a life. There was no time to overthink. Rushing out with wind swirling around both legs, a sudden intervention from above forced the wyvern's head down. Standing between the beast and the retreating group, the message was clear. Run, I'll hold it off. The adventurers were stunned but recognized the help. Their leader, Rex, shouted that they would meet again in the city of spirits before they vanished into the trees. Now it was a one-on-one duel. The wyvern attacked with its tail, but a quick back jump and a counter thrust with a steel sword kept it at bay. However, the beast was smart. It used its broken wings as shields, realizing physical steel wasn't enough and ice sword was summoned into the left hand, a blade of pure magical frost. With the wind skill active and the ice blade ready, the fight moved to a new level. A kick powered by wind magic sent a blade of air slicing into the wyvern's leg, drawing blood. It worked. Magic was the key, but a moment of overconfidence led to a mistake. The wyvern charged with insane speed, slamming into the defense and launching the body into a massive tree. The impact was brutal, knocking the wind out and blurring vision. To make matters worse, the steel sword had snapped in half during the collision, and the broken tip was now buried in the thigh. After retreating into the air to gain distance, the metal shard was ripped out, and the wound was frozen shut with ice magic to stop the bleeding. Desperate for a better weapon, a dash toward a nearby campsite led to a hidden bag. Inside was the ancient elf sword found in the ruin. As the wyvern prepared one last high-impression breath attack, a leap from the trees met the blast head-on. The emerald blade of the ancient relic sliced through the magic breath like paper. Passing through the storm, a final horizontal slash across the wyvern's throat ended the fight. The beast collapsed into a pool of its own blood. Exhausted and battered, the long trek back to Spirits began. Using the ancient sword as a walking stick, the city gates finally appeared in the moonlight. The guards were initially terrified seeing a person covered head to toe in monster blood. But Harold, the guard captain, arrived to clear things up. After a night of magical healing and much-needed rest at the guard station, a summons arrived from the guild master. On the way to the guild, a run-in with Dianiela led to a quick catch-up over street food. She hadn't received the message about the fight, but she joined the walk to the guild, clearly worried. Inside, Rex and his party were waiting. They were overjoyed to see their savior alive. Danny the tank was recovering thanks to expensive treatment. Rex insisted on splitting the wyvern's bounty, handing over a massive bag of 70 gold coins, half the total reward despite protests that the killing blow was the only part played. Finally, the meeting with the guild master Bordeaux took place. He was a massive man with wild red hair and a loud personality. He dropped the formalities quickly, geeking out over the solo wyvern kill. However, he revealed he knew about the forest wolf's leg skill because it was recorded on the guild's status files. After explaining the danger of being hunted for having monster-derived powers, Bordeaux laughed it off. He told his newest high achiever that adventurers are meant to be free and shouldn't care what others think. To celebrate the freedom, he officially assigned the titles: Silver Green for the hero and White Wind for Dianiela. Though the titles felt a bit embarrassing, the day ended in a celebration. After visiting Danny in the hospital, Dianiela and the rest of the group headed to a tavern. The bond between the party had grown stronger. No longer just solo travelers, they were now a team that truly looked out for one another. The adventurers gathered at a quiet tavern called Fang and Claw. Unlike the rowdy spots most fighters liked, this place was calm and dimly lit. Rex, the leader of the party Asagi had saved, waved them over. He introduced his crew. Darius, the great sword user, Wesley, Benny, and Rex himself were the frontliners. Fared handled daggers and Simon was their archer and item carrier. As they drank, Dianiela couldn't help but brag about their new title. The tavern suddenly got noisy as the other adventurers realized they were sitting with White Wind and Silver Green. Everyone wanted to shake hands with the solo wyvern slayer, making Asagi feel a bit awkward. They enjoyed a massive feast. The meat was so tender it practically melted and stayed until late into the night. After parting ways with Rex's group, Asagi and Dianiela headed back to their inn. Asagi fell into a deep strange dream about his past life working at a convenience store. In the dream, a beautiful customer grabbed his hand and kept calling his name. He woke up startled to find he was actually clutching Dianiela's arm. In his dazed, half-awake state, seeing her familiar face made him feel a rush of affection, and he pulled her in for a kiss. Reality hit a second later. Dianiela turned bright red and Asagi scrambled to explain himself. He confessed everything. How much he had come to rely on her, how seeing her cry for him during the Beowulf fight changed things, and how he had truly fallen for her. Dianiela, overwhelmed, asked for some time to think. An hour later, they met outside. Dianiela was wearing the black and red gothic dress Asagi had bought for her earlier. She looked incredibly cute, and Asagi was floored. They went to a terrace cafe to talk. While Asagi went inside to order, he ran into Rex, who teased him about finally making a move. Back at the table, Dianiela gave her answer. She explained that she had always struggled to open her heart after losing her family, but Asagi had broken through those walls. "I like you too," she said, taking his hand. They almost kissed again, but a waitress interrupted them with their sandwiches at the perfect or worst moment. After their meal, they headed to the paw print armor shop. Asagi paid the final balance, plus an extra 10 gold coins for a special enchantment. A week later, the gear was ready. It was a masterpiece. A hooded poncho made of wind dragon fibers, blue-tinted ice dragon scales, and a custom waist cape added by the shopkeeper's wife for better agility. Stepping out in his new silver-green gear, Asagi felt like a true high-rank adventurer. Dianiela was head over heels for the new look. As they walked toward the guild, enjoying their new status as a couple, the atmosphere was peaceful until they walked through the doors. Waiting for them was Fiona, the guild receptionist. She had a massive, terrifying smile on her face, but the veins popping on her forehead told a different story. "Asagi," she said, her voice dripping with forced politeness. "It's been a while." Fiona was standing there with a scary smile, clearly furious that Asagi and Dianiela had disappeared for days without a word. She dragged them into a private meeting room, making Asagi feel like a kid caught doing something wrong. Dianiela, surprisingly calm, decided to end the tension by grabbing Asagi and kissing him right in front of Fiona. She officially declared that they were a couple now and that she wasn't letting him go. Fiona was stunned. She admitted she had a crush on Asagi because he was more charming and interesting than the usual rowdy adventurers, but she realized she lost because she didn't act fast enough. Dianiela explained that after losing her family to a dragon attack, she had closed off her heart, but Asagi changed her. She was done holding back. Fiona took the rejection gracefully, even though it was painful, and they all agreed to stay friends. Asagi felt bad for hurting her, but he knew he had to choose Dianiela. After leaving the guild, the couple ran into Peninsula, the massive warrior. He teased Asagi about the wyvern fight and noticed his flashy new dragon scale gear. Pizarro mentioned that dragon materials were actually getting cheaper, because heroes were clearing out dragon nests elsewhere. But Asagi's gear was still top tier, since they were all looking for work. Pizarro picked a wolf hunting quest, while Asagi and Dianiela decided to take a kobold extermination quest at a nearby rocky wasteland to test out Asagi's new equipment. They headed to the eastern gate, grabbed some street food, and reached the abandoned mines where the kobolds lived. These mines were supposed to be small and empty of resources, but they quickly realized the place had become a massive deep dungeon. Asagi's new wind dragon armor made him incredibly fast, allowing him to blitz through groups of kobolds with ease. He also tested his ice dragon armor's magic boost, finding that he could freeze enemies solid and craft ice swords much faster and with less effort than before. As they spent the night in the mine, Asagi started feeling uneasy. They were killing hundreds of monsters, and he realized he was actually starting to enjoy the thrill of the hunt. He confessed to Dianiela that he felt like he was becoming a cold-blooded killer, losing his humanity in the dark. Dianiela hugged him, telling him that feeling conflicted actually proved he was still a good person. She explained that all adventurers feel the excitement of exploring the unknown and getting stronger. But as long as he didn't kill without a reason, he was fine. They discovered that the mine was being expanded by whole mole, giant mole monsters that were digging deeper and deeper. This wasn't just a small cave anymore. It was a breeding ground for a potential monster outbreak that could destroy the city of Spirus. Realizing the danger, Asagi and Dianiela decided to push all the way to the bottom to clear out the source before the monsters could overflow and attack the surface. With his heart settled and his gear fully tested, Asagi gripped his sword, ready to dive into the deepest part of the nest. Asagi and Dianiela took a moment to breathe after their deep conversation. Asagi realized he couldn't save everyone or be a perfect hero, but he could protect what was right in front of him. With his heart set, he reached into his hollow bag and pulled out his best weapon, the ancient elf sword and dagger. He was done holding back. It was time for a total takeover. Suddenly, Asaga's presence detection picked up a massive energy signature deep in the darkness. It wasn't the usual flow of the cave. It was something big and aggressive. Dianiela felt it too, her eyes narrowing with a competitive smirk. They moved forward, Asagi, cutting down any minor monsters in their path with single strikes until they reached a massive underground dome. The ceiling was so high their lanterns couldn't reach it. To light the way, Asagi used a fire spell, even though he wasn't great at fire magic. He launched a ball of flames like a flare. The light revealed the Megamole, a giant hairy version of the monsters they had been fighting. Dianiela immediately opened fire with her bow while Asagi charged in. However, the Megamole was smart. As Asagi stepped forward to strike, the ground gave way a pitfall trap. Asagi barely blocked the mole's massive claws while stuck in the hole. Dianiela's follow-up arrows gave him the opening to use Forest Wolf's leg to kick off the air and leap out of the trap. He launched more fireballs too, light up the entire dome, revealing the mole's network of traps. Since they couldn't get close, they switched to long range. Asagi used his jack-of-all-trades skill to visualize and create a barrage of ice arrows. He rained them down on the Megamole until it stopped moving. After a careful check, the beast was officially dead. Just as they celebrated with a fist bump, a new terrifying presence appeared. It felt just like the Beowulf they had fought at the ruins, an abnormal evolution monster. Out of a hidden tunnel stepped a large kobold wearing armor, its fur pitch black. It spoke, claiming to be the king of the Kobold Kingdom and assault kobold. It was furious that humans had interfered just as it was planning to invade the surface. The fight was a blur of speed. The assault kobold fought with retractable razor-sharp claws. It managed to slash Asagi's side, drawing blood because his normal clothes underneath the armor offered no protection. The monster then vanished, moving so fast it was invisible to the naked eye. It slammed into Asagi from behind, sending him tumbling. As the kobold moved in for the kill, Dianiela stepped in. She didn't just block. She positioned her blade so perfectly that the kobold's own momentum caused it to slice its own arm off at the elbow. Screaming in rage, the monster tried to use its speed again, but Asagi was ready. He created thick ice walls to box the monster in. With the kobold trapped, Asagi grabbed Dianiela and used Forest Wolf's leg to launch them toward the ceiling. They dived back down like twin meteors, driving their swords through the kobold king's chest. Asagi finished it off with a final strike to the neck. Exhausted, they harvested the king's claws, fur, and fangs. They found a hidden path leading even deeper to a dragon vein where a massive purple crystal sat. It was a dimension or a legendary material that could potentially warp space. Though tempted to try and use it to travel, they decided it was too dangerous and headed back. The return trip was a nightmare. They got lost for 2 weeks because the moles had dug new confusing tunnels. By the time they finally crawled out into the sunlight, they were so sensitive to the light that they both had massive headaches. Back in Spirus, they reported everything to the guild master, Bordeaux. He was shocked they had stopped a full-scale monster outbreak solo. As a reward, he gave them a massive payout and introduced them to a master dwarf blacksmith named Bennett. Bennett used the assault kobold's parts to forge Asagi to custom blades, the claw-fang sword and the short claw blade. 3 weeks passed. Asagi hit level 53 and finally reached C rank, matching Dianiela. He even gained a new skill, night vision, just as they were settling into their new status. News hit the city. A hero from the capital was arriving to investigate the mines. The hero turned out to be Yasashi Matsumoto, a Japanese high schooler who had been transported to this world. Unlike Asagi, Yasashi was a classic main character with cheat stats and a massive harem of beautiful women following him. Asagi and Yasashi hit it off immediately at a tavern, bonding over being Japanese. Yasashi spent the whole night complaining about how hard it was to manage a harem and how he was always getting dragged into trouble. Asagi, looking at his friend's chaotic life, felt relieved. He didn't need a harem or world-saving titles. He was perfectly happy with just Dianiela by his side. The next few days became a routine. Every morning, Asagi and Yasashi met at the restaurant of the Silver Sky Inn for breakfast. Despite being a legendary hero, Yasashi was laid back and preferred a casual friendship over a formal title. While they bonded over shared memories of Japan, their companions hit it off too. Dianiela, usually quiet and reserved, was surprisingly chatty with the girls in Yasashi's harem. During one breakfast, Yasashi confirmed he was in town to investigate the abandoned mines on the king's orders. As rumors of the assault kobold incident had reached the capital, Asagi was officially appointed as their guide since he knew the layout. The group headed back to the mine. Yasashi impressed everyone by using a high-level light magic spell that acted like a portable sun, making Asagi feel a bit insecure about his basic ice magic. However, Dianiela quickly cheered him up, reminding him that she preferred him just the way he was. As they descended, one of Yasashi's harem members, a dwarf girl, spent the entire trek bragging about how Yasashi had saved her home from a cyclop. Asagi found the constant hero worship exhausting, but they eventually reached the deepest part of the cave. The area was clear. No new monsters had evolved. Asagi led Yasashi to the hidden chamber containing the massive dimension, where Yasashi's expression turned serious. He explained that space-time magic was incredibly dangerous and unstable. Even the capital's top royal mage wouldn't dare touch it. Hearing a hero admit the ore was too much to handle made Asagi realize he and Dianiela had made the right call by leaving it alone. To prevent any future accidents, the dwarf girl used her magic to seal the chamber behind a massive reinforced steel door. A week later, it was time for the hero's party to head back to the capital. Yasashi thanked Asagi, admitting that finding another Japanese person in this world gave him the strength to keep going. Before he left, Asagi dropped a bombshell. He hadn't died of old age or an accident. He had been stabbed to death before being reincarnated. Yasashi was shocked he hadn't mentioned it sooner, and the two spent another 2 days talking before the hero finally rushed off. After Yasashi left, Dianiela confronted Asagi. She had figured out he was from another world too. Asagi finally confessed his secret, expecting a dramatic reaction. Instead, Dianiela was incredibly calm. She told him that whether he was from another world or not didn't change the fact that she loved him. She reminded him that they lived in this world now, and the only thing that mattered was their next journey together. Feeling emotional, Asagi acted a bit spoiled, leading Dianiela to hug him tightly and tease him for being cute despite being a grown man. The next day, they prepared to leave Spirus. They said a heartfelt goodbye to Joshua, the innkeeper, and headed to the market to stock up. Asagi's hollow bag had grown in capacity, so he bought fresh meat, vegetables, and fish, planning to impress Dianiela with his cooking skills during their travel. Before leaving the city, they made their final rounds. They visited Harold, the guard captain, who gave them a tearful, formal salute, and then headed to the guild. The guild master Bordeaux and the receptionist Fiona were waiting. Bordeaux gave them a loud, boisterous farewell, while Fiona and Dianiela shared a moment of mutual respect, part friends, part rivals for Asagi's affection. After one last massive feast with their friends Rex and Pinchoro at the Fang and Claw Tavern, Asagi and Dianiela finally walked out of the southern gates. Their destination was the Flugelnia Empire, a massive nation to the south. To get there, they had to cross the Alexia mountain range and pass through the mining town of Alessa. Dianiela explained that while the empire was a military powerhouse, it was actually peaceful. Their army mostly performed in parades and handled monster outbreaks rather than starting wars. The journey was long but peaceful. They camped under the stars where Asagi cooked delicious meals that left Dianiela stuffed and happy. After 3 days of trekking through plains and rocky hills, they reached the base of the mountain. Asagi, paranoid that a monster would attack right as they reached safety, was on high alert. Suddenly he detected something approaching fast from behind. He drew his sword ready for a fight, only for a carriage to pull up. It was Nick, the owner of the paw print shop. He was heading to Alessa to deliver clothes. He offered them a lift and they gladly hopped in. On the way, they were attacked by a group of cliff eagles. Asagi and Dianiela easily took them down using ice magic and arrows. By evening they reached Alessa. The town was a vertical marvel, built into the cliffs with tracks for ore carts running everywhere. After Nick dropped them off, they found a tavern that also served as an inn. The owner, a blunt man who was a great cook, gave them rooms on different floors. Exhausted from the road, Asagi and Dianiela decided to visit the local hotering. After a bit of confusion in the steamy cave-like bathhouse, Dianiela used a gust of wind magic to clear the vapor. As the steam vanished, Asagi realized the bath wasn't separated by gender. Dianiela was sitting right there in the water with him. It turned out the town's mixed bath tradition was yet another thing Asagi wasn't prepared for. After the steam cleared, Asagi and Dianiela found themselves in a mixed bath. Dianiela had simply given up on being embarrassed and decided to enjoy the water. Asagi noticed a strange splashing sound earlier and teased her about it. After some persistent staring, Dianiela finally admitted she was so excited for the hot springs that she accidentally dove into a deep spot and started drowning. Their private moment was interrupted when a busty woman from the tavern, Lisa, walked in. She revealed that the tavern owned the bathhouse and it was part of her job to provide certain services. When she tried to get close to Asagi, Dianiela's mood turned freezing. She threatened Lisa, but Asagi stepped in to calm things down, explaining it was just a misunderstanding. Grateful for being spared, Lisa gave Asagi a massive hug, burying his face in her chest until he passed out from the pressure. Asagi woke up later in his room with a headache. Unable to sleep, he went for a midnight walk through the vertical town of Alessa. While wandering the high cliffs, he was suddenly attacked with a pickaxe. The attacker was the leader of the thugs from Feraldo, the same ones Asagi had sent to the mines as slaves. They had been waiting for revenge. More ex-adventurers emerged from the shadows to surround him. Asagi, unarmed and without his gear stat boost, had to rely on his pure skill to dodge their strikes. He managed to break through and run toward the tavern, hoping to find the guard station. He ran into Lisa again, who gave him directions. But the thugs caught up and surrounded the building. When one of the men threw a pickaxe at Lisa, Asagi stopped holding back. He activated Forest Wolf's leg, moving like a silver-green blur. He used a new sub-skill, launching blades of wind from his kicks to slice through the thug. One by one, he neutralized them, cutting their tendons so they couldn't flee. The leader ran to the highest point of the town, but Asagi used his wind magic to step through the air and confront him. The thug begged for mercy, but Asagi grabbed him and dangled him over the cliff. He let go, letting the man experience a terrifying free fall before zooming down, even faster to catch him with a wind cushion kick just before he hit the ground. The thug fainted from pure terror. The next morning, the town guards arrived. The captain, Bacchus, who happened to be the cousin of Asagi's old friend Russell, took over. He explained that the slave managers were corrupt and lazy, which is why the thugs were able to roam free. Bacchus offered to have them all executed, but Asagi, after a long night of thinking, chose mercy. He asked only to have their sentences extended, believing everyone deserves a chance to change. Dianiela supported his decision. As they prepared to leave Alessa, Lisa gave Asagi one last deadly hug, much to Dianiela's annoyance. They also said goodbye to Nick, the shopkeeper, promising to promote his armor in the Empire. The duo trekked through the Alexia mountain range and finally entered the Flugalia Empire. The border was covered in a dense forest of barrel trees that dripped a sweet, addictive honey. They encountered their first imperial monster, a forest goblin. These variants had long arms and massive claws for climbing. Working in perfect sync, Dianiela parried the beast's claws while Asagi used his assault kobold sword to slice off its arm. Dianiela finished it with a swift stab to the throat. After harvesting the trophies, they continued through the eerie honey-dripping woods until they reached the gate of the first imperial town, Vadorf. The guards there were highly skilled but had a flair for the dramatic, welcoming them to the forest in town with a theatrical salute. Asagi and Dianiela headed to the Free Information Center to find a good place to stay. Dianiela acted all serious, making Asagi think something major was wrong, but it turned out she was just worried about missing dinner. Asagi checked the flyers and picked a cozy-looking inn called Camrite Sunlight, in which specialized in forest-themed dishes. Inside, the inn had a peaceful forest vibe with green decor and sunlight filtering through the ceiling. They met the owner, Dorothea, and booked separate rooms for 3 nights with meals included. After checking into his room, which literally looked like a forest inside, Asagi decided to go for a walk. He ditched his heavy armor and poncho, keeping only his shirt, pants, and a basic iron sword to look like a casual adventurer. While wandering the town, Asagi noticed small fountains everywhere. An old lady explained they were magical sprinklers connected to the underground water veins to prevent fires in the wooden town. Feeling hungry, Asagi followed his nose to a hidden restaurant called Kira Akabout's Stump Tavern. The place was run by a cool, handsome guy, and it was packed with women. Asagi had an amazing meal of chicken soup and fresh bread that was so good it almost blew his mind. Later, Asagi visited a magic item shop. He saw a barrier device like Dianiela's, and was shocked to see it cost 50 gold coins. Realizing Dianiela owned 4 of them, he gained a new level of respect for her skills and hard work. Feeling tired, he sat in a park and decided to experiment with his gear. He channeled mana into his wind dragon pants, and suddenly his legs felt light as air, erasing his fatigue. Excited, he tried the same with his assault kobold leather shoes. Big mistake. The shoes immediately started sucking his mana and released a thick black foul energy. Asagi felt a rush of pure hatred and a vision of the assault kobold's ghost trying to grab him. He had to fight to rip the shoes off, discovering they had left bruise-like handprints on his ankle. Realizing all his kobold-made gear, the shoes, his necklace, and his main sword, were cursed with the monster's grudge, he froze them in a block of ice to keep them stable and rushed back to the inn. He told Dianiela everything. She agreed that the gear was too dangerous to use, since his main weapons were cursed and he was back to using basic leather shoes. They headed out the next morning to find replacement. After a quick breakfast at the inn, they navigated the back streets to find a legendary shoe shop called Handful. The shop was tucked away in a quiet corner of town. As they looked at the display, a voice called out from below. Asagi looked down and saw a young boy holding a wooden hammer. The kid turned out to be Handful himself, a legendary dwarf craftsman. After a brief argument where Handful hit Asagi with his hammer for being rude, Asagi had to swallow his pride and apologize to the grumpy blacksmith to get the gear he needed. Asagi apologized to the cranky craftsman Handful to get the gear he needed. Inside the shop, he noticed the shoes were enchanted with stat boost. Handful revealed he was the one who added these effects, proving he was a skilled enchanter despite his bad attitude. Asagi picked out a pair of black high-top boots made from axle panther leather, which boosted his agility. Even though they were expensive, Asagi used the reward money from the previous stampede to pay for them. After a quick lunch at the inn, Asagi and Dianiela headed to the other side of town to find a blacksmith. On the way, Asagi wondered about the agility doubling shirt he had seen before. He realized that his current speed with his Forest Wolf leg skill was much faster than what that shirt offered, making him suspect the shirt's enchantment might have been a fake or a different type of magic entirely. They reached Cashier's weapon shop, but the place seemed empty. Asagi went into the back and found the workshop was incredibly hot. He discovered the blacksmith Cashier collapsed on the floor from heat stroke. Asagi dragged him out and used ice and water magic to cool him down. Once Cashier woke up, he thanked Asagi and helped him pick out a new weapon. Asagi chose a sturdy one-handed sword called Grand Panzer, designed for pure durability. While they talked, Cashier mentioned a famous traveling enchanter named Rachel Vannerin who had worked on some of his high-end gear. This name caught Asagi's attention because Vannerin is another name for the legendary wolf Fenrir, which tied back to the wolf-themed skills he possessed. Asagi also picked out a unique short sword called Ashikurimaru, which looked like a Japanese blade, in a discount for saving Cashier's life. To finish his shopping, Asagi decided he wanted a great sword. Cashier hesitated, warning him not to become a jack of all trades, master of none. But Asagi insisted he wanted to learn every weapon. Cashier eventually gave him his master's final creation, Schwar's Tempest. It was a massive black sword carved from the fossilized bone of a tempest whale. Since the sword held blue mana and Asagi also possessed blue mana, Cashier felt it was destiny and gifted it to him. Meanwhile, Dianiela had gone off on her own, feeling ignored by Asagi's long weapon shopping session. She wandered the town and found a restaurant called Stumpin'. The food was so incredible that it completely fixed her bad mood, though she ate so much she ended up falling asleep on a park bench. Asagi eventually tracked her down with the help of some local kids. He apologized for getting carried away, and they spent the night together at the inn. The next morning, they prepared to leave town. After a final goodbye to Cashier, they headed east toward a famous adventurous town known for producing legendary heroes. On the road, they were attacked by a grass wolf. Asagi tested his new greatsword, Schwar's Tempest, and was shocked by its power. It sliced the monster clean in half with almost no effort. He realized the sword could even extend its reach using water magic, making it a terrifyingly strong weapon. As the sun set, they found an old campsite and set up for the night. While Dianiela prepared the fire and Asagi set up the tent, he looked up at the stars. He thought briefly about his old world, his family, but he realized that, as much as he missed them, he wouldn't leave Dianiela behind. He was ready to make this new world his permanent home. As the night deepened, Asagi handled the late watch shift while Dianiela slept. To pass the time, he boiled some monster bones for morning soup, watching the two moons tilt across the sky. When dawn broke, he tried to wake Dianiela by poking her cheek, but she just pulled the blanket over her head. He eventually had to use a bit of ice magic on her feet to get her up, earning himself a sleepy glare. Asagi prepared a special breakfast of hearty bone broth soup and ham sandwiches with fresh vegetable. They enjoyed the meal together in the quiet morning air, listening to the birds. Dianiela noted that they weren't in a rush and should prioritize staying safe. After finishing, They packed up and continued their journey. The flat plains soon turned into rolling hill. Asagi spotted some wild horses running in the distance. Feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a while, they took a break on a grassy hill, lying down to watch the clouds, and a pair of red birds flying overhead. The calm atmosphere was so relaxing that both of them accidentally drifted off to sleep. Asagi woke up shivering as the sun began to set, realizing he'd slept far too long because of his late-night watch. Since it was already getting dark, they decided to camp right there for another night. The next morning, it was Dianiela's turn to cook. She made bacon, eggs, and toast, which Asagi thoroughly enjoyed. As they cleaned up, Dianiela mentioned they would likely reach a village by evening. She couldn't remember the village's name because she was too focused on their final destination, the adventurous city of Lapine. Before heading out, Asagi wanted to test his new Axel Panther boots. He offered to carry Dianiela on his back to test his speed. With her holding on tight, he channeled mana into the boots and took off. He managed to hit a speed of about 40 km/h, maintaining a steady pace until they reached the gates of Senna village. The village was small and rustic with no walls or heavy gates, just a simple wooden entrance. Inside, they met a friendly villager with a hoe who directed them to the village chief's house since there was no inn. The chief's granddaughter, a quiet girl named America, greeted them at the door. The chief, an old man named Lionel, offered them a vacant house to stay in for free, provided they cleaned it themselves. America even offered to help. The three of them spent the afternoon scrubbing the dusty old house. Asagi used his water magic to fill buckets, which amazed America, who had never seen magic before. Dianiela and America bonded over the cleaning, and by sunset, the house was spotless. When they finished, Dianiela didn't want to leave America behind, but Asagi reminded her that kidnapping was a crime. They returned to the chief's house to drop off the cleaning supplies and share some tea. Back at the vacant house, the friendly villager from earlier stopped by with a pot of hot boar soup his mother had made. Touched by the kindness of the locals, Asagi and Dianiela finished the delicious meal and headed to bed. The night took a romantic turn, leaving Asagi exhausted but happy by morning. The next day, they cleaned the house one last time and went to say goodbye. America was tearful about their departure, and Dianiela was equally emotional, giving the girl a long hug. Before they left, America gave Asagi a small handmade animal charm named Gimshin. Asagi attached it to his bag, promising to treasure it forever. As they walked away from the village, both Asagi and Dianiela found themselves crying at the bittersweet farewell. As they headed south toward the plains, a thick fog rolled in. Asagi's presence detection picked up multiple enemies. Suddenly, a group of mist goblins, pale monsters that used the fog as camouflage, surrounded them. The goblins attacked with coordinated strikes, but Asagi and Dianiela fought back to back. Asagi used his greatsword to take them down while firing ice arrows at those trying to flank him. Once the 6 goblins were dealt with, they collected the loot and hurried out of the fog before more could arrive. By the next day, they reached a forest. Asagi felt relaxed by the scenery, but Dianiela warned him to stay alert. That night, while Asagi was on guard duty, he realized he had become too comfortable and let his guard down. Just as he was scolding himself for his lack of focus, a blood ape dropped from the trees directly onto their campfire. Asagi shouted for Dianiela, who immediately blasted the monster with wind magic. Dianiela explained that blood apes have a presence-hiding skill, making them nearly impossible to detect. More apes emerged from the shadows surrounding the camp. A brutal 3-hour battle followed, with Asagi and Dianiela taking down nearly 50 of the monsters. By the end, Asagi was completely drained, though his detection skills had leveled up from the intense pressure. Exhausted, Asagi crawled into the tent to sleep. He noticed a piece of cloth stuck to his finger and thought the bedding had torn. Just then, Dianiela called him back outside, looking incredibly embarrassed. It turned out the torn cloth Asagi had stuffed in his pocket wasn't from the tent. It was Dianiela's underwear she had left behind. After a very awkward exchange, Asagi realized that Dianiela had been just as lonely as he was. The next morning, they pushed through the final stretch of the forest. Asagi practiced extending his detection range upward to avoid more surprises from the trees. Finally, they broke through the treeline and saw a clearing. In the distance, a carriage had been overturned and several men on horseback were circling it. Dianiela immediately identified them as bandits and fired an arrow, knocking one off his horse. Asagi hesitated for a second, never having fought a human before. But Dianiela reminded him that if he didn't act, the innocent people in the carriage would die, stealing his nerves. Asagi activated his speed skill and charged forward with his greatsword to protect the travelers. Asagi struck with the dark blade, cutting the bandit down in a single blow. The reality of killing a human for the first time hit him hard, making his stomach churn. Even though he did it to protect people, the guilt and disgust felt like a heavy weight on his soul. More bandits attacked, fueled by rage, but Asagi used his forest wolf-like skill to leap through the air and take them down. He felt like a ghost, moving without thought, swinging his sword just to survive. He kept repeating Dianiela's words, that unnecessary killing is evil, meaning this was necessary just to keep his mind from breaking. By the time the dust settled, only he and Dianiela were left standing among the bodies. Asagi collapsed, overwhelmed by the weight of his actions, and lost consciousness as Dianiela called his name. While he was out, Dianiela looked after the survivors. A young girl named Marielle was weeping over her father, who had been killed before they arrived. Dianiela felt a pang of guilt. She had known Asagi wasn't ready to face human opponents yet, but she couldn't just stand by while innocents were being slaughtered. She knew Asagi came from a world where killing was forbidden, and while she didn't fully understand his deep trauma, she respected his kind heart. In his sleep, Asagi had a nightmare. He was trapped in darkness, chased by the crawling torso of the first bandit he killed. The ghost grabbed his leg and whispered that he would end up the same way. Asagi woke up screaming in the blood-stained grass. Dianiela was there carrying him on her back to comfort him. Marielle approached them, thanking Asagi for saving her life. Seeing her alive and safe acted like medicine for Asagi's soul. He realized that while he had taken lives, he had also saved one. He held the girl and cried, finally feeling the tremors in his hands stop. He felt terrible about her father, but Dianiela reminded him that they did their best and couldn't have known about the attack sooner. Before leaving, Asagi insisted on burying everyone, even the bandits. He didn't forgive them, but he needed to do this to find closure. He even performed the grim task of taking the bandit leader's head to claim the bounty. Wanting the world to acknowledge that this fight was justified, they buried the bodies near the forest and marked the graves with simple wooden crosses. After a long day, they set up camp near the lights of the city, Lepent. Asagi used his magic to set up a hot bath for Dianiela and Marielle to wash away the blood and grime. While they bathed, he sat by the fire, reflecting on how much he had changed. He wasn't just a part-time worker from Earth anymore. He was becoming a true adventurer. The next morning, they headed to the city gates. Marielle drove her family's carriage, and Asagi tried riding a horse for the first time, which was fun, but left him with a sore backside. When they reached the massive gates of Lepent, they found a huge line of people waiting to enter. While waiting, a loudmouth female adventurer noticed Asagi was covered in dried blood and started yelling at him for being gross. She ended up using a cleaning spell from the no magic category to instantly wash his clothes. Asagi was amazed. He didn't even know that kind of magic existed. The girl realized who they were, the famous Silver Emerald and White Wind, and went from being angry to acting like a total fangirl. She even begged Asagi for an autograph, which he awkwardly signed on the back of her armor. Finally, they reached the guards. Since their status cards were old style from a different region, the guards had to use a special machine to process them. During the wait, the guards realized Asagi and Dianiela were the ones who saved Marielle. They showed deep respect, thanking them for protecting a citizen of Lepent. It was time to say goodbye to Marielle. It was a tearful farewell as the girl headed into the city to start her new life. After she left, the guards finished the paperwork and officially welcomed them to the adventurous city of Lepent. As they walked through the gates, Asagi teased Dianiela about her age. She had previously claimed to be around 100, but she finally admitted she was actually 300 years old, which is like being 30 in human years. Shocked but smiling, Asagi walked side by side with his partner into the bustling city, ready for a new chapter. Asagi and Dianiela walked through the crowded streets of Lepent, heading toward the Grand Guild. The building was massive with a fancy crest featuring a dragon, sword, shield, and a boot. Inside, it looked like a high-end hotel with a 3-story open ceiling and magical chandeliers. The guild was organized with specialized counters for everything from registration to material exchange. Since their status cards were outdated, they lined up at the general inquiry counter. While waiting, Asagi noticed the other adventurers were surprisingly well-behaved, likely due to strict guild management. When their turn came, the clerk took their cards, explaining that the update would take about 10 minutes and include new details like skill levels and titles. While waiting in the lounge, Asagi got bored. To pass the time, he used his ice magic to create a highly detailed miniature ice sculpture of Dianiela. The surrounding adventurers were stunned by his precise control. Several high-level parties immediately tried to recruit him. Realizing he was a skilled mage who could also fight up close, Dianiela, wearing her mask to avoid trouble, stepped in and shut them down. Claiming Asagi was her partner and wasn't for hire, They returned to the counter to collect their updated cards. The new style cards showed much more information. Asagi saw his rank was C, and his title was Silver Emerald. His agility was his highest stat at 684, and his ice magic was level 8 out of 10. Dianiela's card showed she was rank B, titled White Wind with her wind magic, at a maxed out level 10. After leaving the guild, they went looking for food and a place to stay. They found a street food market where Dianiela's appetite took over, and they ended up eating various meat skewers. By sunset, they realized they still hadn't found an inn. Luckily, the man running one of the food stalls, Bacon, offered them a room. At his family's inn, the Lamb's Hoof, the inn was luxurious, managed by Bacon's son, began. Since it was the busy season, only one high-end suite was available for 2 gold and 20 silver coins for 2 weeks. The room was incredible, featuring a large bed, a glass table, and a private bath with marble tiles. Asagi struggled with the magical faucet until Dianiela showed him how to crush water and fire stones into the device to get hot water. After a long soak, they turned in for the night. The next morning, Asagi woke up early and headed to the guild alone while Dianiela stayed in bed. The guild was packed with adventurers competing for quests. Most of the good jobs were already taken, leaving only low-level tasks like hunting goblins or gathering herbs. As Asagi reached for a goblin quest, a young, arrogant boy named Penrose, who turned out to be the guild master's son, tried to snatch it away. Penrose insulted Asagi, calling him a boring old man and a poor loser. Just as a fight was about to break out, Asagi's old friend, Gardo, appeared. Gardo and his partner Nis had also come to the city to find better work. Penrose continued to act like a spoiled brat, even disrespecting the guild staff. When Asagi tried to leave, Penrose kicked him in the back, knocking him out the door. The kid challenged Asagi, claiming that a real adult is someone with high-end gear and a famous title. Fed up, Asagi told the kid to wait 10 minutes. Asagi rushed back to the inn, woke Dianiela, and told her they needed to show this kid what real adventurers looked like. They geared up in their best equipment, Asagi in his ice dragon armor, and Dianiela in her forest people gear. They raced back to the guild using Asagi's speed and Dianiela's wind magic to drop from the sky right into the middle of the crowd. Holding his massive greatsword, Asagi landed in front of the stunned Penrose, ready to prove exactly who was the superior adventurer. Asagi and Dianiela landed right in front of the guild, making a grand entrance from the sky. The arrogant kid Penrose stepped back in shock as Asagi introduced himself as the Silver Emerald, a rank C adventurer. Dianiela followed up, identifying herself as the rank B adventurer, White Wind. The surrounding crowd gasped. These were the legendary duo who had taken down a wyvern and suppressed a monster stampede. To seal the deal, Asagi slammed his massive greatsword, Schwar's Tempest, into the ground, explaining it was a one-of-a-kind weapon carved from a legendary monster. Dianiela drew her white rapier made from the core of a world tree. Seeing their high-end gear and hearing their titles, Penrose finally broke. He fell to his knees, his pride completely shattered. Asagi didn't just want to bully the kid, though. He looked Penrose in the eye and told him that while he was wrong to look down on others, it was a mistake he could fix. He reached out and helped the boy up. The other adventurers in the guild, who were usually annoyed by Penrose's bratty behavior, started cheering and offering to take the kid on quest once he leveled up. Tearing up, Penrose apologized to everyone and promised to work hard to become a real hero. Feeling a bit responsible for the kid, Asagi decided to take Penrose on a goblin hunting quest right then and there. After updating their status cards at the counter, the trio headed to the forest west of the city. On the way, Dianiela noticed that Penrose's sword was unusually long for his side. The boy explained he used a custom long blade to make up for his short reach, which impressed Asagi. Once they entered the forest, Asagi began teaching Penrose the basic. He explained that even weak goblins are dangerous if they have weapons and that forest wolves often hide in the same areas. As they walked, Dianiela teased Penrose about his age. When he proudly said he was 12, she patted his head like a child, which annoyed him. He asked how old she was, but Asagi quickly intervened, knowing that asking her age was a death wish. They soon spotted a lone goblin. Asagi told Penrose to take it down. The boy was nervous, but he rushed in and executed a perfect strike, taking the monster's head off in one go. While Penrose was shaky after his first kill, Dianiela reminded him that an adventurer must always remember the weight of taking a life or they'll turn into a beast. Asagi decided to push the training further. He spotted another goblin and used a small ice pebble to alert it, forcing Penrose into a direct confrontation instead of a sneak attack. Penrose panicked at first, but managed to block the goblin's rusty blade and finish it off. Dianiela scolded the boy for freezing up, telling him that in a real fight, he needs to move faster than the enemy can react. During their lunch break, they sat on a fallen log and discussed strategy. Dianiela pointed out that by letting a goblin scream, Penrose risked attracting a whole pack. Asagi realized he still had a lot to learn about group combat himself. After a full day of hunting and leveling up Penrose's presence detection skill, they headed back to the city. At the guild, they found a frantic skinny man with long blonde hair running around and screaming for Penrose. It was the boy's father, Klein Mavis, who happened to be the Grand Guild Master. Despite his high rank, he was a total helicopter parent who panicked whenever his son was out late. Klein invited Asagi and Dianiela to his private office for a meeting. He thanked them for looking after his son, and was amazed that Penrose had already learned a new skill. However, the conversation took a turn when Klein mentioned he knew about Asagi's special mana from the guild master in Spirits. Asagi got annoyed, realizing that his old boss, Bordeaux, had been gossiping about his secret skills again. As they left the office, Klein started a long motherly lecture about the dangers of the night and staying out past 6:00 p.m. Asagi and Dianiela didn't stick around to listen. They slipped out the door while he was still talking. Later that night, they headed to a restaurant called the Anthill to meet their old friends, Gardo and Nest. The place was a rowdy barbecue joint where everyone cooked meat over magical burners. The four of them caught up over piles of grilled meat and drinks. Gardo and Nest explained that they had been working in the capital before coming to Lapel a week ago. As the night went on, Nest and Gardo got completely wasted. Nest was babbling nonsense, and Gardo eventually passed out at the table. Since Asagi didn't know which inn they were staying at, he had to leave Dianiela at a nearby park, while he ran back to the guild to look up their registration info. Using his ice magic, Asagi created a makeshift sled to drag his drunk friends through the street. After finally finding their inn and dumping them in their beds, he headed back to Dianiela, exhausted and ready to finally get some sleep himself. Asagi woke up feeling refreshed, but Dianiela was still sound asleep. Looking back at the night before, Asagi had a blast catching up with Gardo and Nest at the restaurant. It was a relief to see him laughing and joking again, especially since Gardo and Nest had no idea about the bandits Asagi had been forced to kill on the way to the city. While Asagi slept that first night in Leplin, Dianiela had quietly slipped out of the room. She carried the severed head of the bandit leader wrapped in thick cloth to the central guard station. She wanted to handle the grim evidence herself, so Asagi wouldn't have to deal with the reminder of his trauma. At the station, she met a captain named Assam. After a brief tense moment, where the guards mistook her for a troublemaker, she handed over the head for inspection. The bandit turned out to be a man named Garganzer, a former rank C adventurer who had escaped a labor mine after committing various crimes. Because he had been terrorizing the area for so long, there was a massive bounty of 10 gold coins on his head. Dianiela collected the reward, feeling a bit better knowing that the man Asagi killed was a dangerous criminal who truly deserved his fate. She returned to the inn and fell into a deep sleep next to Asagi, which is why she ended up oversleeping the next morning. The next day, Asagi and Dianiela spent a peaceful afternoon exploring Lepin, eating street food, and enjoying the sights. However, the topic of the bandits eventually came up. Dianiela confessed that she had already turned in the leader's head and explained the man's dark history to Asagi. She told him that in this world the line between good and evil is often settled by who survives, and while taking a life is heavy, it was necessary. Asagi felt a bit of closure realizing he had stopped a monster. Later the conversation shifted to magic. Asagi realized he didn't actually understand the science of how his powers work. Dianiela explained that magic relies on 3 things: having mana, having an elemental affinity, and most important, the power of imagination. She revealed that there are 8 basic elements: fire, water, ice, earth, thunder, wind, light, and dark. She also explained that incantations, chanting spells, are actually just training wheels for people who can't visualize the effect clearly. Asagi was embarrassed to learn that his custom move names like Ice Sword were actually considered beginner level or even uncool by professional standards. In the academic world, his Ice Sword would be called Frost Sword and his Ice Bind would be Frosty. Dianiela went deeper, explaining the hexic theory of elemental strengths and weaknesses. For example, fire is weak against water and ice, while wind and earth counter each other. She also mentioned that a mage can overwrite an opponent's spell if they have significantly more mana, essentially hijacking the magic. Most impressively, she explained that spirits, which only she can see with her special eyes, can boost a person's magic to a legendary level if they have a good bond with the user. Eager to test these new theories, Asagi dragged a very sleepy Dianiela to the guild early the next morning. They met Gardo at the entrance, who mentioned that his partnerness was still hung over and in bed. As the guild doors opened, Asagi felt a surge of excitement. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a mage swordsman ready to master his skills. They joined the rush of adventurers toward the quest board, looking for a mission. To test out Asagi's new combat ideas, Asagi and Dianiela reached the guild early. But the scene was pure chaos. The early morning quest rush was in full swing, with adventurers turning into literal beasts, pushing and shoving to grab the best jobs. Asagi managed to snatch 3 random papers from the board just to get out of the fray. Feeling like he'd survived a war, he sat down with a sleepy Dianiela to check the loot. A goblin hunt useless, a blood ape hunt too annoying, and an investigation of the Southern Valley. Since the pay was high and they didn't want to go home empty-handed, they took the valley quest. The receptionist explained that travelers had seen strange large shadows moving at the bottom of the foggy valley, and they needed to find out if it was monsters or bandit. After stocking up on supplies, including a mountain of cloth scraps from a friendly seamstress and some street food, Asagi ran into Penrose. The kid had actually changed his ways and formed his own party of young adventurers. Asagi gave him some senior adventurer advice on harvesting herbs and felt like a proud parent watching the kids head out. Asagi met Dianiela at the south gate, which was packed with high-level parties. Word was out that an orc horde had raided a village 5 days ago, and a massive subjugation force was heading out. Dianiela shared a chilling detail. The shadows in the valley were described as large humanoids that moved only when the fog was thin. Since orcs usually aren't stealthy, they suspected an abnormal evolution was leading them. They reached the valley 2 days later. To clear the thick mist, Dianiela used a high-level wind spell, Gale Storm, creating a massive tornado that blew the fog right out of the canyon. The effort drained her mana, and she took a nap on Asagi's lap to recover while he admired her admittedly accidental asymmetrical haircut. Once she was rested, Asagi used his forest wolf's leg to carry her down into the valley. They found a deep footprint, not from a boot, but a bare heavy foot. Nearby was a handprint where something had slipped. Following the trail, they discovered a hidden tunnel dug by hole moles identical to the ones they saw back in the Spear's mines. This confirmed their fear. A smart orc leader was using monsters to dig secret pots to bypass human detection. They followed the tunnel and found an underground forward base filled with blood-stained crates. While it looked like a horror movie, Dianiela realized the blood was just from slaughtered livestock used for rations. The orcs had used this tunnel to sneak behind the village, raid it, and retreat back through the valley with stolen goods and kidnapped women. Stealing their nerves, they exited the tunnel near the village of Sierra. The sight was heartbreaking. The entire village had been burned to the ground. They encountered the main subjugation force already there, led by a man named Virgil. After a tense standoff where the guards almost attacked them, Asagi and Dianiela explained the secret tunnel and the abnormal evolution theory. Among the crowd, they found their old friends, Gardo and Nis. Virgil agreed to let them lead a scouting party to find the main orc nest. Nis joined as the lead scout while Gardo stayed with the main force to provide heavy muscle. As night fell over the ruins of the village, the group prepared for a counterattack. Their goal was clear: find the Orc Kingdom, rescue the survivors, and end the monster leader once and for all. The adventurers didn't waste any time. After a quick meeting, they split into 2 groups. The ground team led by the scoutness and the valley floor team, led by a noble-born scout named Angelica. Because of his incredible speed, Asagi was assigned as the messenger to jump between both groups and keep everyone connected. While the teams prepared, Asagi and Dianiela revisited the hidden tunnel the orcs had used. Seeing the bloodstained crates and gear firsthand convinced the leaders, Virgil and Angelica, that these weren't just mindless monsters. These orcs were organized and tactical. Back at the main camp, the atmosphere was tense. With 30 skilled fighters, including 10 mages, under Daniela's command, they were ready. But they knew the clock was ticking. As they moved further south along the valley, the weather turned gloomy. Asagi felt a strange calm before the storm vibe. Once they reached the end of the valley, they set up a base camp without fires to avoid being spotted. Virgil gave a final pep talk. They had 2 days to find the orc settlement before supplies ran out. Asagi started his rounds, first helping Angelica's all-female team get down to the valley floor. Among them was Laurier, a girl Asagi had helped back at the city gates. After dropping them off, Asagi used his wind-enhanced speed to scout from the sky, but the thick forest made it impossible to see anything. He dropped to the ground and eventually found Ness's team. They had discovered a scratch on a tree and some footprints, proof that orcs were moving on the surface. Asagi rushed back to Virgil with the news. They realized the orcs likely had a base on the surface, but used tunnels to pop up in the valley whenever they wanted. While Dianiela trained the mages, Asagi headed back to the valley floor. To help Angelica's team, he used a massive burst of wind to blow away the thick fog, exposing several mist goblins that were stalking them. He took them out instantly. However, the mood shifted when Angelica found a hidden cave entrance tucked between rocks. It was covered in fresh footprints. It was the jackpot, but Asagi felt a sudden chill. If the orcs were this organized, they probably knew the adventurers were there. He realized the footprints Ness found might have been a trap to lure them away from the camp. "They're going to ambush the camp tonight," Asagi warned. Angelica quickly set a magic, explosive trap at the cave entrance, and Asagi raced back to the surface. On his way, he found a log bridge the orcs were using to cross the valley and smashed it to slow them down. When he reached the river, where Ness's team was supposed to be, he found a nightmare. 3 adventurers were lying in the water, which was stained red with their blood. They were alive but unconscious. One woke up just long enough to whisper that the orcs had ambushed them from the trees. Ness and 1 other scout were missing. Asagi ran back to camp to get help, but when he returned to the river with reinforcements, it was too late. The 3 injured men had been finished off with swords through their chest. Rage and guilt hit Asagi hard, but there was no time to mourn. Suddenly, orcs with bows began firing from the treetop. Asagi used a new ice shield spell to block the arrows and leaped into the trees, slicing through the branches and the orcs. The group fought their way back to the main camp, carrying the bodies of their fallen friend. The camp was now fortified with high earth walls thanks to Dianiela and the mages. Virgil took the news of the failed scouting mission heavily, but Dianiela snapped them out of it. "The dead won't come back. We have to fight for the living," she said. Asagi proposed a new plan. Build a narrow kill zone at the camp entrance with high platform. This would force the orcs into a tight space, where the adventurers could rain down attacks from above. As night fell and the first sounds of the orc army echoed through the woods, the adventurers took their positions. The real battle was finally here. Asagi woke up to find Lawyer hovering over his face. She had been sent to wake him, but her nervous behavior suggested she might have been up to something else while he was sleeping. Before Asagi could tease her more, Dianiela arrived to drag them both to the main square. The camp was buzzing with good news. Angelica's scouting team had returned with a gift. It was Ness. He had survived the ambush through pure luck, after being separated from his team. Ness had accidentally stumbled upon the orc settlement while fleeing north. Fortunately, he ran into Angelica's scouts before the orcs could find him. As they prepared to march on the settlement, Asagi confessed his guilt over the 3 adventurers he couldn't save earlier. Ness gave him some real talk. In this life, you have to stay mentally strong, or the weight of those you couldn't save will eventually break you. Asagi realized he had to carry those memories as motivation rather than a burden. The army set out for the orc settlement. This time they didn't need a map. The retreating orcs had left a massive trail of broken branches and footprints straight to their front door. When they arrived, the battle was short. The adventurers were elite and the orcs were already demoralized from the night's defeat. While the main force cleared the camp, Asagi headed into a hidden underground passage that led toward the valley floor. Deep inside a dark, damp corridor, he found a row of prison cells. In one of them sat a strange orc. Unlike the wild, muscular ones outside, this one looked more refined. "Please, you have to help me. Get me out of here," the orc pleaded in perfect human speech. The orc introduced himself as Arthur and claimed to be the true king of the orcs. He explained that he was an evolved orc, but unlike the brutal leader outside, he preferred peace and coexistence. He claimed he had been overthrown and locked away by the fake king, the armored brute seen earlier, who had used dark influence to turn the pack violent. Asagi stood before the bars, staring at this self-proclaimed king. It was either the luckiest find of the mission or the most dangerous trap he had ever walked into. Giving a monster the benefit of the doubt was risky, but if Arthur was telling the truth, he could be the key to ending the orc threat for good. The adventurers arrived at the orc settlement located halfway down the valley. The area smelled of iron and blood from the previous night's battle. Asagi looked at the bridge the orcs had used to launch their surprise attacks. It was simple, but effective, hidden well enough to stay unnoticed until now. As they approached the settlement's massive wooden walls and gates, a strange silence hung over the place. Dianiela, sensing the air, whispered that she couldn't feel any presence inside. Angelica peeked through the gate and confirmed it was empty. Virgil ordered a cautious entry. Inside, they found a fully functioning village with well-built houses, far more advanced than anything a normal orc could create. However, the homes were empty and looked like they had been cleared out in a hurry. Virgil split the group up to search the houses. In the chaos of everyone pairing off, Asagi found himself accidentally left alone, Feeling a bit pathetic, he wandered toward the outer walls to clear his head. While walking, he noticed a trail of footprints leading directly into a section of the wall. He pushed on a hidden panel, revealing a secret door. A ninja house, he muttered. It was clear the orcs had used this secret exit to flee during the night. He followed the tracks to a cleverly hidden hole in the ground similar to the one used to attack the village. Asagi realized that only a small number of orcs had gone this way, which felt like a trap. Just as he was about to head back for help, Dianiela appeared behind him. She hadn't abandoned him. She had simply cleared out her admirers so they could work together again. Reunited, the two entered the tunnel. They descended a long, well-made stone staircase that led away from the valley floor. After 10 minutes, they reached a fork in the path. Following Dianiela's gut feeling, they took the left path, which led even deeper underground. Eventually, they heard a man's voice calling out. Using their sensing skills, they discovered a row of prison cells hidden by magic. Inside, one was a white-skinned orc who spoke perfect human language. The orc introduced himself as Arthur, the true king of the orcs. He explained that he wanted his people to live in peace and self-sufficiency, without attacking humans. However, 2 weeks ago, a brutal orc named Mord led a coup, threw Arthur into the cell, and turned the pack violent. Arthur had secretly instructed his loyal followers to dig escape tunnels and flee if things got bad. Asagi, moved by Arthur's sincere desire for peace, decided to trust him. He and Dianiela used their swords to shatter the magic bars. Arthur thanked them, but Asagi told him to flee and find his people while the adventurers dealt with Mord. Arthur mentioned his sword Excalibur was likely still with Mord. Asagi promised to try and recover it. After a firm handshake, Arthur disappeared into the tunnels to lead his people toward a nomadic, peaceful life. Asagi and Dianiela headed back to the settlement and found the camp in an uproar. The main orc hideout had been discovered under the largest building in the village. Virgil and the others were stuck at the entrance of a massive underground chamber. Mord had lined up orc archers in a firing line formation, shooting anyone who tried to enter. Asagi proposed a plan. He would use his wolf's leg skill to sprint down a long slope at maximum speed, breaking through the archer line like a human bullet. Dianiela used her earth magic to create a smooth 200-meter runway for him. With a signal from Virgil, Asagi took off. He reached top speed in 3 steps, looking like a blur of silver and green wind. He slammed into the orc front line, killing the first few instantly. Before the rest could react, he unleashed a spell called Ice Bullet. All direction shot, firing hundreds of tiny ice shards in every direction. The archer line collapsed instantly. The rest of the adventurers rushed in to finish the job. In the center of the room stood a massive black orc holding a shining white sword, Mord. He was furious, even killing his own retreating soldiers in a fit of rage. Asagi and Dianiela teamed up against him. Mord was fast and strong, but Dianiela managed to pierce his eye with her rapier, while Asagi sliced his inner thighs to ruin his mobility. Cornered and bleeding, Mord did something no one expected. He channeled red magic and launched a massive fireball. "Look out!" Dianiela yelled, pushing Asagi out of the way. The fireball hit her directly and exploded. The blast sent Asagi flying, and he landed hard on a pile of orc corpses. A sharp pain flared in his left arm. He had been impaled by a discarded orc sword. Gasping for air and bleeding heavily, Asagi saw Virgil holding an unconscious Dianiela. He had used his own magic to shield her at the last second. Virgil pointed toward a dark tunnel where Mord was escaping, ignoring the agonizing pain in his arm. Asagi gripped his sword and limped into the darkness. This was the final stretch. He wasn't letting Mord get away. Asagi limped into the dark tunnel, his left arm impaled by a sword and his body screaming in pain. He followed the trail of blue blood belonging to the Orc King Mord. Despite the trauma of his injury, Asagi refused to stop. He knew that if Mord escaped, more villages would suffer. Using his sensing skills, he located the weakened leader resting against a wall ahead. Asagi drew his sword with his one good hand and launched a barrage of ice magic. The two clashed in a desperate struggle. Mord was powerful even while injured, nearly crushing Asagi with a heavy tackle. But Asagi managed to dive between the brute's legs to avoid a fatal blow. They stared each other down, both exhausted and bleeding, until a small pebble fell from the ceiling. That tiny sound triggered their final charge. They swung at the same time, passing each other in a blur. When the dust settled, Mord's hands had been sliced off. Asagi had one, though he took a shallow cut to his right arm in the process. Mord tried to flee, screaming in rage and pain. Asagi chased him through the winding tunnels toward a light at the end, the exit. Just as the orc reached the opening, he triggered the magic explosive trap Angelica had set earlier. A massive blast rocked the cave, burying the exit and Mord under tons of rock. Asagi found the legendary sword Excalibur lying in the dirt nearby. He picked it up, promising to return it to the rightful King Arthur. Back in the main chamber, the battle was over. The adventurers had wiped out the rest of the orcs. Asagi found Virgil and Nis, who were relieved to see him alive despite his gruesome wound. He collapsed onto a mat next to an unconscious but stable Dianiela, finally letting his consciousness fade as the long mission came to an end. A month later, peace had returned to the city of Leprint. Asagi and Dianiela spent their final weeks recovering, hunting with Gardo and Nis, and mentoring the young adventurers of the Penrose party. However, the time came for them to continue their journey toward the imperial capital. On their last day, they made their rounds to say goodbye. They visited the food stalls where the vendors gave them extra meat for the road. Asagi had a final friendly sparring match with the Penrose kids in the park, encouraging them to keep growing stronger. They met Gardo and Nis at the guild, sharing a heartfelt farewell with the men who had become their brothers in arms. They even ran into Virgil and Angelica, who revealed they were now officially a couple. Finally, Asagi said a tearful goodbye to Laurier and the other female scouts. Before leaving the gates, Asagi and Dianiela made one last stop at a small shop called the Little Bird. This was the home of Marielle, the young girl Asagi had rescued when he first arrived in the area. Meeting Marielle's mother, Yuffie, Asagi finally broke down. He apologized for not being able to save Marielle's father, but Yuffie held him, explaining that there is no weight to sadness and that he shouldn't blame himself. She thanked him for saving her daughter's life, finally freeing Asagi from the guilt that had haunted him since the rescue. With their hearts light and their packs full, Asagi and Dianiela walked through the south gate of Leprint. They headed toward the mountains, ready to face whatever new adventures the road to the imperial capital would bring. For the first time since his reincarnation, Asagi felt like he was truly living his life to the fullest. 5 days after leaving the city of Leprint, Asagi and Dianiela reached the foot of the mountain. They camped near a village that had been destroyed by orcs. Reflecting on the tragedy, Asagi remembered hearing about a nearby ancient ruin and convinced Dianiela to take a detour to explore it, hoping for a hidden discovery. The next morning, after a quick breakfast and some playful bickering, they found the site. It was a mess of overgrown weeds, vines, and crumbling stone. Dianiela explained that many teams had investigated the area over the years, but found nothing, concluding it was just an isolated, nameless building. Restless and acting on a whim, Asagi pulled out a broom and started cleaning the rubble. While moving a heavy stone using his magic, he noticed a faint pattern on the underside. After brushing away the dirt, he revealed a symbol that matched the one on his ancient elf sword. Dianiela was shocked. This was the emblem of the ancient elf. Because researchers usually didn't vandalize ruins by flipping heavy stones, everyone had missed the secret for centuries. Asagi decided to stay for 2 days to investigate further, while Dianiela moved ahead to the next mountain pass. Left alone, he first checked the sky using his wolf's leg skill to run on air, but found nothing but a great view. On the second day, he focused on the ground. Using a concentrated blast of wind magic, he excavated a 2M hole in the center of the ruins. Deep in the dirt, he felt a strange flow of magic, a dragon vein effect protecting the area. He dug further and discovered a circular metal hatch with a handle like something from a submarine. Inside was a ladder leading down into a long-illuminated hallway preserved by ancient magic. Exploring the rooms, Asagi found a storage area filled with automa, Lee-like mechanical dolls. Some were just skeletons, while others looked like perfect human women. He also found a true treasure in the final room, 2 pairs of glasses. Putting one on, he realized they were appraisal glasses. They allowed him to see the stats and descriptions of any item like a video game interface. This was a massive find as appraisal tools were incredibly rare. He then experimented with the automa. Using his new glasses, he learned they were powered by monitors located in their backs. He found a core, charged it with his own magic, and practiced opening the doll's skin to install it. Deciding he couldn't leave such a masterpiece behind, he dressed one of the female dolls in his poncho and cape to hide its nakedness and carried it out. Asagi reunited with Dianiela at the mountain pass. She was initially furious that he had brought a naked corpse to their camp, but he explained it was a mechanical doll. Dianiela warned him that these dolls were so rare that people had killed for them in the past. She insisted they sell it at an auction in the imperial capital of Velrost rather than keep it. She estimated that the doll, along with the extra power cores Asagi found, could fetch over 5,000 gold coins, a life-changing fortune. Asagi agreed, realizing that their 2-person journey was more important than a mechanical companion. With the automa safely tucked away in his magic bag, the duo began their descent toward the capital. excited for the riches and new adventures waiting for them. Asagi and Dianiela spent the next 10 days traveling down from the Rocky Mountain. To lighten the mood during their easy descent, Asagi finally revealed the second treasure he had found in the ruin, a pair of frameless appraisal glasses. He playfully insisted Dianiela try them on, and the intellectual look only made her more beautiful in his eyes. However, the mood turned serious when Dianiela looked through the lenses. She realized they weren't just normal glasses. They were a national treasure-level item that could reveal the true nature of anything from common herbs to legendary swords. She warned Asagi that such an item could collapse kingdoms if it fell into the wrong hands, as it would expose every lie and fake relic held by the nobility. They decided to keep the glasses a secret, treating them as a ticking time bomb that only they would ever use. As they reached the base of the mountains, they set up camp by a small river. While Asagi was cooking a meal of meat, vegetables, and grilled fish, he sensed something entering their perimeter. Using his night vision, he scouted the woods and found a forest wolf covered in deep gashes, barely clinging to life. Instead of killing it for a quest reward, Asagi felt a strange connection to the creature due to the forest wolf's blessing he carried. He used his expensive potions and magic to heal the wolf and brought it back to camp. The next morning, the wolf, now named Marco, acted completely tame, almost like a pet dog. Dianiela guessed that Marco might be a walled wolf, a rare subspecies born in areas with high mana concentrations. Realizing Marco was likely a village's guardian, they followed him as he led them toward a settlement called Donna Village. Upon arrival, they met Marco's owners, a young boy named Mato and an older man named Is, a retired adventurer, thanked them for saving the wolf and invited them to stay at his home. During dinner, Is revealed he possessed a unique skill called Heart Color Eye, which allowed him to see the goodness or evil in people's hearts. He explained that this was how he knew he could trust Asagi and why he had protected Mato and Marco when the village wanted to kill the monster boy. The peaceful evening was cut short when the wind began to howl unnaturally. As his expression darkened as he sensed a familiar threat, he revealed that a lesser wyvern had been terrorizing the village's livestock, and Marco had been injured trying to defend the farm. Asagi realized with a jolt of panic that Dianiela, who had stepped out for a walk, was likely facing the beast alone, since she had a deep-seated trauma regarding dragonkin. He knew she would be in trouble. He activated Wolf's leg and sprinted toward the village pastures, leaving his behind in a blur of speed. He arrived to find Dianiela struggling. Although she was bravely facing her fears and hadn't frozen up like before, she was exhausted and cornered. Asagi leaped from the sky, channeling water magic into his greatsword, and sliced off the wyvern's right wing in one clean hit. He quickly moved Dianiela to safety, where she clung to him, trembling, but relieved, leaving Dianiela to recover. Asagi engaged the beast. The lesser wyvern was fast and used its remaining wing to create sharp gusts of wind that cut Asagi's skin. Is and Marco arrived to help with his managing to distract the creature by slashing its tail. Seizing the opening, Asagi used his water-enhanced blade to sever the wyvern's tail completely. The monster, now unable to balance or fly, prepared to fire a desperate breath attack. Asagi didn't give it the chance. He used a burst of wind from his legs to propel himself forward at godlike speed, decapitating the wyvern before it could release its fire. The battle ended as the beast's head flew into the air and its body collapsed into a pool of blood. Asagi stood over the fallen dragonkin and proved once again that speed was the ultimate weapon. After the battle with the lesser wyvern, the villagers of Donna gathered at the pasture. The ranch owner Regal thanked Asagi profusely, refusing to let him apologize for the mess and instead shaking his hand with a massive smile. Asagi reunited with Dianiela, who had finally overcome her paralyzing fear of dragonkin. She credited her newfound courage to Asagi's presence, feeling that being with him had acted like medicine for her old trauma. The next morning, the village worked together to dismantle the wyvern. Since normal tools couldn't cut through its hide, Asagi used his magic to create dozens of ice scalpels for everyone. The process took all day, leaving Asagi more exhausted from maintaining the magic than he was from the actual fight. Regal offered a reward gathered by the villagers, but Asagi initially tried to refuse, wanting the materials to go toward repairing the village's loss. However, Regal insisted, explaining that the village was strong because of its unity, and that they took pride in rewarding their saviors. Asagi accepted the reward, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the kindness he had found in this world. That night, Asagi had a nostalgic dream about his old life as a night shift worker. Remembering his boss and the mundane stress of the city, he woke up in the Hunar Chinese letter shack they had found near the city of Nicola. Dianiela, who had been on watch, revealed she had discovered something suspicious. several wooden crates hidden under a cloth. When they opened them, they found a massive hoard of magic ores, clearly the illegal loot or funding of a bandit group. Dianiela's first instinct was to keep the treasure, arguing that taking a thief's resources weakens them and funds their own journey. Asagi, however, felt a deep moral conflict coming from a world of strict laws. He didn't want to become a thief himself. They had a serious discussion about their differing perspectives. Asagi explained that he needed to live with a clear conscience to truly feel like a hero, while Dianiela admitted that her long, harsh years of solo travel had made her cynical and pragmatic. Ultimately, Dianiela respected Asagi's blindingly bright sense of justice. They agreed to take the crates but hand them over to the guards in Nicola as confiscated good, leaving the responsibility to the state. After a final hearty breakfast of grilled meat, they approached the water city of Nicola. Unlike the previous friendly towns, Nicola looked gloomy and gray. Dianiela warned that this place was famous for its slums and corruption, far worse than anything they had seen before. With the illegal crates in their magic bag and their guards up, they walked toward the city gates, ready to deal with the shady atmosphere of the water-eyed metropolis. Asagi and Dianiela arrived at the west gate of Nicola at 8:00 a.m. The guards were just as corrupt as rumored, with messy uniforms and a rude attitude. Asagi played the role of a humble traveler and handed over their status cards. To avoid trouble, they decided to hand over the magic stones found in the bandit shack. Immediately, Asagi casually told the guard they found something dangerous in his shack during the rain. The guards, smelling of tobacco, whispered for them to drop the goods behind the guardhouse out of public sight. Behind the building, 3 middle-aged guards confronted them. Asagi pulled 12 wooden boxes of amber magic stones from his magic bag, impressing the guards with the haul. One guard claimed they would take care of the stones, assuming Asagi was just a traveler following the rule. However, as they tried to leave, a clever-looking guard stopped them, claiming their captain wanted to thank them personally. Sensing a trap, Dianiela signaled Asagi to leave, but they were forced inside. They were led to a large office where they met the captain, a dark elf named Eve. She was the first person of color Asagi had seen in this world, looking like a movie star, but with a wicked personality. Eve immediately recognized Dianiela, revealing they had a history. Dianiela, disgusted, called Eve a former bandit leader. Eve laughed, explaining she had captured, tortured, and brainwashed the previous captain years ago to take over the city's security and use it to fund her bandit operations. Eve demanded Dianiela's artifact of the world tree, her rapier and bow. When they refused, Eve ordered her guards, who were actually bandits in uniform, to kill them. A fight broke out. Asagi used his ice magic to freeze the floor, trapping the guards in even place. Dianiela didn't hesitate. She lunged forward and stabbed Eve through the chest. Surprisingly, Eve didn't die. She used a substitution tool she had stolen from Dianiela a century ago to survive the lethal blow. The room turned into a chaotic mess of fire and wind magic as Eve retaliated. To clear a path, Dianiela prepared a massive tornado spell. Asagi held off Eve's combined fire and wind attacks with multiple ice shields, but the intensity was overwhelming. Realizing Dianiela's magic was about to go out of control, Asagi told her to fire the spell even if he was in the way, trusting his wind dragon clothing to protect him. The resulting explosion sent Asagi flying high into the sky. Asagi woke up midair, using his forest wolf's leg skill to stand on the sky itself. Below him, the guardhouse was a pile of rubble. Worried about Dianiela, he descended back toward the city. Meanwhile, Dianiela had escaped, but was suffering from mana depletion. She was taken in by a local man named Vento, who gave her water and cooked her a meal of bacon and eggs. As she ate, she remembered her past with Eve. 100 years ago, they had fought over a caravan. During a wyvern attack, Dianiela had dropped her substitution tool, and Eve had snatched it before Dianiela fell off a cliff. Dianiela had survived by luck, but Eve had kept the artifact all this time. Back in the city, Asagi struggled to find Dianiela while dodging guards. He realized the bandits were using a watchtower to track his movements from above. He stormed the tower, taking out for guards and reclaiming a stash of stolen food. Suddenly, a massive fireball launched by Eve struck the tower, killing her own men in the process. Seeing Eve's ruthlessness made Asaga's heart turn cold. He realized that to protect Dianiela, he had to be willing to kill. With a new dark determination, he pulled out his greatsword, covered himself in wind magic, and prepared for a final showdown to take Eve down and find Dianiela. At the same time, unaware of Asagi's dramatic resolve, Dianiela finished her breakfast at Vento's house. Impressed by the perfect cooking, Asagi didn't waste a second. He charged toward the guardhouse from the watchtower, sprinting through the air. Eve launched another massive fireball at him. But Asagi was ready, using his jack-of-all-trades skill to predict her moves. He infused his wind-powered legs with blue mana, turning the air around his feet into a freezing gale. Instead of dodging, he kicked the fireball head in, realizing that in this world, ice and fire can cancel each other out if you have enough mana. He sped toward the guardhouse, ignoring the arrows fired by bandits below. Eve tried to block him with a barrage of smaller fireballs, but Asagi twisted through the air or sliced them down with his greatsword. Since the sword was made from the bones of a legendary monster, the heat didn't even scratch it. When the smoke cleared, he saw Eve standing on the rubble. Dianiela was nowhere to be seen, which was a relief. It meant she was still safe. Asagi lowered his stance and accelerated, aiming to end Eve once and for all. Eve gathered mana for her signature fire and wind tornado, but in the open sky, Asagi had the advantage. He dodged the blast and swung his greatsword, sending a wave of water-infused mana at her. Eve barely dodged, and Asagi's strike shattered the debris where she had been standing. Dust filled the air, blinding them both. Asagi backed off, sensing Eve's position and firing ice swords into the cloud. He heard her grunt in pain a hit. He followed up with icicle rain, sending hundreds of ice spears crashing down. When the dust settled, Eve was pinned down, bleeding from her limbs. She had used up her tricks and had no more substitution tools left. I underestimated you, Eve hissed, looking at Asagi. I thought you were just Daniela's sidekick. I am her partner, Asagi replied coldly. And because you're a threat to her, I'm finishing this. Asagi rushed in to take her head, but Eve smashed a magic tool on the ground, creating a blinding flash of light. Asagi was staggered, his vision turning white. He tried to track her by scent and sound, but suddenly sharp pain shot through his leg. Bandit reinforcements had arrived with bows using special arrows that pierced his dragon-scale clothing. Blind and injured, Asagi was in a tight spot until a familiar presence entered his sensing range. At incredible speed, the newcomer wiped out the four archers. Asagi smiled as the person approached. It was Dianiela. She had recovered, thanks to Vento, a local man who turned out to be an undercover agent from the other side of the river. Vento had given her a high-grade mana potion, and now she was back at full strength. I'll take it from here, Dianiela said, giving Asagi a quick soft kiss before chasing after the fleeing Eve. Asagi stayed back for a moment to let his vision recover and pull the arrows from his leg. Meanwhile, back at Vento's house, it was revealed that half the city actually hated Eve. Vento and the other guards Asagi had met earlier were actually spies from the neighboring city of Nikolasuku, waiting for a chance to take Eve down. As Aga's vision cleared, he ran into one of these friendly guards who gave him high-grade healing and stamina potion. Another guard gave him a silver ring, a magic tool that hides the wearer's present. Fully healed and invisible to magic detection, Asagi reached the center of the city. He found the battlefield turned into a wasteland of fire and rubble. Dianiela and Eve were mid-fight, but Eve had a final trump card. She activated a hidden magic circle on the ground. A massive green wind dragon emerged from the portal and clamped its jaws onto Dianiela's arm, a summoning spell. Eve laughed. This is an adult wind dragon. You're dead. Asagi screamed and charged, seeing Dianiela's blood dripping from the dragon's teeth. He pushed his forest wolf's leg skill to its absolute limit. In a literal blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the dragon and drove his greatsword through its lower jaw, pinning its mouth shut. The dragon roared in agony, releasing Dianiela. Asagi caught her in midair and retreated to a safe distance. Dianiela's arm was shredded, bone showing through the skin. Asagi poured a high-grade healing potion over the wound. The skin bubbled and smoked, but within seconds her arm was perfectly healed. I'll handle the dragon, Asagi said. You take Eve. We do this together, Dianiela insisted. They shared a moment of resolve before jumping back into the fray. Asagi faced the dragon. He let the beast charge up a high-density wind breath, then used his speed to create a decoys, while the dragon fired at his after image. Asagi leapt above its head. He expanded the mana edge of his great sword until it was massive and brought it down in one clean, powerful strike. The wind dragon's head was severed instantly. At the same time, Dianiela cornered Eve. Eve tried to fight back with a magic nullifying curved sword, but Dianiela was too fast. She used a combination of wind-boosted stabs and earth magic to trip Eve up. Finally, Dianiela drove her rapier straight through Eve's heart, ending the century-long grudge. With the battle over, Asagi's body finally gave out from overusing his skills. He collapsed, unable to move. Daniela found him, and in a funny role reversal picked him up in Princess Carrie. A crowd of over 100 bandits gathered wanting revenge for their boss. But Dianiela stood her ground. I killed Eve, she shouted, holding the paralyzed Asagi. And this man killed the dragon. Come forward if you want to join them. Seeing the severed dragon head and Dianiela's sheer intensity, the bandits lost their nerve and fled the city. Dianiela then tucked the massive dragon carcass into Asaga's magic bag. Since it was a summoned creature, but a physical body, they could keep the material. Dianiela carried Asagi to the riverbank, where they rested until morning. Once Asagi could move again, he put Dianiela on his back and used his wind skills to run across the surface of the water. They passed some fishermen who were stunned to see people running on the river. As they approached the far bank, Asagi felt a sense of excitement. They were leaving the corruption of the water city behind and heading toward their next stop, the trade city of Asuku. Asagi stepped onto the docks of Aku and immediately felt the difference. Unlike the gloomy atmosphere of Nicola, this place was buzzing with life. Workers were busy moving crates and everyone looked healthy and well-fed. The air was filled with the scent of spices, and a friendly local explained that Aku was a major trade hub where you could find almost anything. As Asagi walked through the city with Dianiela still asleep on his back, a guard named Yukon stopped them. Since they had skipped the formal entry at the docks, they had to go to the station for processing. Yukon led them to a beautiful white brick building that looked more like a mansion than a guard post. When Asagi marveled at the architecture, Yukon laughed, explaining that in a prosperous city like Aku, this was just a normal building. The loud laughter woke Dianiela up. Still half asleep and grumpy, she mumbled something about liking bacon. Yukon, taking her nonsense very seriously, saluted her and declared his own love for bacon. After Dianiela drifted back to sleep, Asagi and Yukon shared a laugh, though Yukon quickly corrected Asagi for calling him bacon. Inside the office, Yukon checked their status cards and was shocked to see that both Asagi and Dianiela held special title. Asagi spent the next few hours explaining everything that had happened in Nicola, the bandit stones, the corrupt guards, and the battle with the wind dragon. Yukon was stunned that they had actually taken down a dragon-type monster. Since Dianiela was still passed out on a makeshift bed of chairs, they decided she could give her official statement about Eve's death. Later, Yukon gave Asagi a map and a recommendation for an inn called the Rippling Pavilion. Asagi found the inn tucked away in a quiet alley. It was a beautiful wooden building with a small clear stream running behind it. There he met the landlady Klamath. She was a polite, beautiful woman, though she had a bit of a sharp, sadistic streak when she revealed she was ignoring Yukon's recommendation letters because he kept turning them into love poem. Asagi checked into room 106, a cozy space filled with the warm scent of wood. He laid Dianiela on one of the soft beds and waited for her to wake up. When she finally stirred after sunset, he caught her up on the move to Aku and their talk with Yukon. Dianiela confirmed she had killed Eve, but hadn't taken a trophy like a head. Out of respect for their shared elven heritage, feeling hungry, Asagi pulled some mystery sasiki soba from his magic bag. Dianiela, in her usual food-obsessed fashion, finished hers instantly and then proceeded to eat Asagi's portion too while his back was turned to clean off the dragon. Blood and grime, they headed to a nearby public bathhouse. At the bathhouse, Asagi ran into Temps, one of the undercover guards from Nicola. Thames revealed he was actually a member of the Imperial Intelligence Agency. He thanked Asagi for taking down Eve and warned him that the Empire might keep an eye on them now since they were powerful enough to be considered a potential threat. Thames also shared the sad news that their third companion, Wellen, had been killed by a bandit's arrow during the escape. The next morning, after a delicious breakfast, Asagi and Dianiela split up. Dianiela went to give her report to Yukon, while Asagi headed to the Adventurers' Guild to sell material. They agreed to use the Wind Dragon parts to upgrade their gear before selling the rest. At the Isuku Guild branch, a massive palace-like building, Asagi ran into trouble while waiting in line. 3 arrogant adventurers tried to cut in front of him, calling him a coward and mocking him for staying quiet. When one of them got physical and put an arm around him, Asagi snapped. He used a swift shoulder throw to slam one into the floor, kicked the second one in the jaw with a mana-boosted strike, and swept the legs of the third, slamming his face into the ground. The fight was interrupted by the guild master, Rio Grande. Instead of punishing Asagi, Rio was thrilled. He led Asagi to a private room and confessed that those 3 were local nuisances the guild couldn't touch because of bureaucracy. Rio revealed he was a fan of Asagi's silver-green title and waived any fines for the brawl. Asagi then went to the back of the guild to show his material. When he pulled the massive, severed head and body of the wind dragon out of his magic bag, the staff nearly fainted. Rio promised to have the dragon butchered and appraised by the next day. With time to kill, Asagi explored the guild's library. He waded through a mix of useful monster manuals and weirdly specific light novel. He studied the local monster distributions, realizing that the threats in this region were much higher than where he had started. Later, as he walked through the city, Asagi noticed he was getting harassed by thugs every few steps because of his cheap plain clothes. Realizing he needed a wardrobe change to stop being a trouble magnet, he went looking for a tailor. On his way, he spotted a strange alleyway that everyone else seemed to be ignoring, as if it were invisible. Intrigued and sensing a mystery, Asagi stepped into the hidden path to see where it led. Asagi stepped through the alley, but instead of coming out the other side, the path just kept going. He tried to turn back, but a solid wooden wall had appeared out of nowhere, blocking his exit. He tried to break it, but it wouldn't budge. Even weirder, his forest wolf's leg skill wouldn't activate, as if some magic was jamming it. Realizing he was trapped in some kind of high-level illusion or pocket dimension, Asagi geared up with his magic armor and sword, preparing for a fight. Just as he braced himself, a window nearby slid open. A young girl with silver hair wearing a tank top and casually eating a bowl of rice looked out and snapped at him for being so noisy while she was trying to eat. Confused by the domestic scene in the middle of a magical trap, Asagi followed her inside. The girl introduced herself as Rachel Vanaland. To Asagi's shock, she revealed she was originally Japanese just like him. She explained that this alley was actually a pocket dimension she created that serves as her personal home and entranceway to the rest of the world. Rachel wasn't even human. She was a feral, the highest evolution of a wolf monster, who had spent 800 years evolving before learning humanization magic. She was also the legendary enchanter, who had worked on the weapons Asagi saw back in Vadorf. They spent hours talking about their shared homeland and the magic of this world. Rachel revealed she was the court mage from Ramber and the mentor of Asagi's friend, Matsumoto. Before Asagi left, Rachel offered to make him her familiar, which would upgrade his skills to divine wolf status. Asagi turned her down, explaining that he didn't care about reaching the level of gods. He only cared about his journey with Dianiela. As Asagi prepared to leave through the window, Rachel played a prank on him, making him feel like he was falling into the sky. Before he suddenly woke up, back in the normal street of Aku, he found a note in his hand that simply said, "Ha, gotcha, idiot." After reuniting with Dianiela at the guard station, they checked in with Yukon Bacon. He confirmed that the situation in Nicola was finally being handled by the military and thanked them for their help. Back at the inn, Asagi showed Dianiela the magic key Rachel had given him. Dianiela figured out it was a magic tool and used her mana to unlock thin air, opening a portal back to Rachel's pocket dimension. They popped back in briefly to see Rachel's Japanese-style house, complete with a bathhouse and tatami mats before returning to their world to rest. The next morning, they went to the Adventurers' Guild to finalize the Wind Dragon material. The staff had done an incredible job butchering the beast, and the materials were in perfect condition, thanks to Asaga's magic. Back, while Dianiela and the receptionist discussed selling the parts, Asagi pulled a local butcher aside. He secretly kept a few high-quality scales and teeth, planning to have a pair of matching necklaces made as a surprise gift for Dianiela. With the dragon parts set for auction, Asagi and Dianiela decided to take a simple monster survey quest to kill some time. They headed out of the city's east gate, eager to see what kind of creatures lived in the surrounding wilderness. While they waited for their massive payout, Asagi and Dianiela left the trade city through the east gate, heading north toward the river's upper reaches. After a Inuit walk, they followed a small branch of the river into the plains. While watching small fish in the water, Asagi sensed a large group of goblins approaching. The two hid behind some rocks to observe a family of 11 goblins, 2 armed adults, 4 scouts, and 5 young ones, approaching the water to drink. Though Asagi felt a pang of guilt about attacking the young ones, he knew the rules of this world. Monsters left alive would eventually hurt people. Following Dianiela's lead, Asagi used his ice magic to freeze the water, trapping the young goblins by their faces. Dianiela moved like the wind, stabbing the armed adults from behind while Asagi finished off the scouts with thrown daggers. Once the adults were cleared, they systematically ended the trapped young one. Asagi felt heavy-hearted afterward, but Dianiela comforted him, saying that valuing life is what keeps a person human, even when survival demands taking it. They discussed the idea of Asagi becoming a familiar. To Rachel the funeral, Dianiela suggested he think of it as becoming a sworn friend or ally instead, which made Asagi feel much better about the potential upgrade. After a quick lunch and harvesting the goblin ears for proof, they continued their trek. As they walked, Dianiela shared her own shift in perspective. Having lost her family to monsters, she used to kill them out of pure hate, but over time, it had just become a routine job. Meeting Rachel, a monster who lived and felt like a human, had reminded her that all life has value, even if some must be taken for protection. Asagi agreed, realizing that in this world, he had to take lives to prevent more fires from spreading to others. The pair spent the rest of the day hunting a few grass wolves. As they headed back to Isuku, the orange sunset made Dianiela's platinum hair glow, and Asagi couldn't help but tell her how beautiful she looked, making her blush. Back in the city, Asagi followed the scent of spices to a hidden restaurant that served curry and naan. It was a nostalgic taste of home for him, and Dianiela loved it so much. They both ordered seconds. Full and happy, they walked back to the inn, Armin sharing a quiet moment of gratitude for each other. The next morning, they went to the guild to collect the payout for the wind dragon materials. The receptionist then led them to a private room and handed over a massive bag of 2,000 gold coins. The materials were so high quality and rare that they fetched the maximum price. Asagi struggled to lift the 60-kilogram bag of gold, stuffing it into his magic bag while noticing Sen seemingly pulling items from a hidden pocket, likely another of Rachel's magical intervention. With their new fortune, they headed to the artisan district. At a shop called White Lily Clothing, they met a seamstress named Chia and her assistant, Segura. Asagi handed over the remaining wind dragon scales and hide, and Chia promised to create a masterpiece for Dianiela within a week. While they waited, the shop staff forced Asagi into a fashion makeover since his plain clothes made him look weak and prone to harassment. A week later, they returned to find the shop staff acting flustered and disheveled, as if they had been caught in a private moment. Putting the awkwardness aside, Tia revealed Daniela's new outfit, a stunning white dress with jade accents and high-quality leggings made from dragon material. Tia also surprised Asagi with high-grade dragon scale innerwear to protect him in combat. The total bill came to 460 gold coins, which Asagi paid happily. Next, they tried to find a blacksmith to fix Dianiela's gauntlets using the dragon materials, but every smith in the city refused, claiming the dragon scales were too tough for their hammers to work. Realizing they would need a master smith in the imperial capital for such high-level gear, they decided to find a temporary replacement in Aku. After visiting several shops and finding nothing that suited Dianiela's specific needs for wind and earth-based combat, they stumbled upon a shop called Solo's Antique Armor. Sensing a potential hidden gem among the old gear, Daniela led the way. Inside, Asagi and Dianiela entered Solo's Antique Armor, a shop so cluttered and dusty it looked like a hoarder's room. In the back, they found the shopkeeper, a frail old man who seemed completely out of it, barely responding to Dianiela's questions with a repetitive, "Is that so?" Dianiela was frustrated by the old man's docility, but followed her gut, feeling that a great piece of gear was hidden in the mess. Asagi decided they should search the shop themselves to protect against the thick dust. Asagi pulled clean cloths from his magic bag to use as masks for both of them. They split up, with Asagi clearing a small space in the center of the shop to serve as a testing area. After hours of digging through piles of armor, finding shields inside breastplates and gauntlets inside boots, Asagi's organization habit kicked in, and he ended up tidying the shop as he searched. By sunset, they hadn't found the right item yet. Dianiela insisted on continuing, so Asagi set up magic lights to brighten the gloomy interior. Around midnight, they finally finished their search, leaving the shop organized into neat sections while the old man slept in the back. The next morning, they returned to the shop Asagi used his appraisal glasses, an artifact from an ancient elf ruin. Asagi no longer measured his life by the shift he had escaped, but by the people and promises he had chosen to protect. Dianiela remained beside him, not as a distant legend, but as the partner who trusted his judgment when every road became dangerous. His strength had grown through weapons, magic, monsters, loss, and mercy. Yet his humanity remained the victory that mattered most. The convenience store worker who entered this world with nothing had built a life through courage, discipline, loyalty, and relentless growth. Together, Asagi and Dianiela continued forward as equals, carrying hard-earned power without surrendering the compassion that made them worth following.